Would you have supported dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, General Brown, in World War II?
Well, Senator, I think it's just based on the situation where the...
Well, we know. I mean, it's happened. We know. I'm not asking. They did it. Do you think that was disproportionate?
It was definitely...
Well, do you, in hindsight, do you think that was the right decision for America to drop 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities in question?
Well, I'll tell you, it stopped the World War.
Okay, well, so we had a... Do you agree, General Austin? If you'd been around, would you say drop them?
I agree with the chairman here.
I mean, if we go back in time, says, hey, we got 2 atomic bombs, should we drop them? What would you say?
Well, I think the leadership was interested in curtailing the...
Well, what's Israel interested in? Do you believe Iran really wants to kill all the Jews if they could? The Iranian regime, yeah. Do you believe Hamas is serious when they say we'll keep doing it over and over again? Do you agree that they will if they can?
I do. Hamas.
Okay, right. Do you believe that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization also bent on the destruction of the Jewish state?
Hezbollah is a terrorist organization.
Okay, so Israel's been hit in the last few weeks by Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, dedicated to their destruction. And you're telling me you're going to tell them how to fight the war and what they can and can't use when everybody around them wants to kill all the Jews? And you're telling me that if we withhold weapons in this fight, the existential fight for the life of the Jewish state, it won't send the wrong signal? Do you still think it was a good idea, General Austin, to get out of Afghanistan?
I support the president's decision.
Yeah, I think you do. I think it was a disastrous decision. If we stop weapons necessary to destroy the enemies of the state of Israel at a time of great peril, we will pay a price. This is obscene. It is absurd. Give Israel what they...
It shows China's strategic thinking in harnessing these
Well, good evening, good morning. My name is Alex with Reporterfy Media here. Time check 10:13 here in Beijing. I'm in Chongqing, China. And we did have some breaking news earlier before the program that it was confirmed that the Iranian president has died in a helicopter crash in a hard landing in fog. There is some speculation around that. And without further ado, we're going to bring on 2 gentlemen that you know very well. Scott Ritter, welcome to the program, Scott. Thank you for joining us this morning. And Carl Zaw, thank you very much. Gentlemen, the news of the Iranian president helicopter crash confirmed, but some speculation around that. Would anyone like to take over and give us your perspective on that?
Well, it has been officially denied by Israel. So nothing is officially confirmed until the official denial. I don't know why Israel felt the need to offer official denial. Who asked them? But I'll let Scott take that because he's the expert.
I think it's just way too early to speculate about the cause of the crash. We know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. There's clearly bad weather, and I would say that helicopters, bad weather, and mountains oftentimes ends up with crashes. Why the Iranian president and the foreign minister were in a helicopter over a mountain in bad weather is a fair question, one that the Iranians will probably have to wrestle with over time. But I think we need to focus on what we do know. And what we do know is that Iran is a constitutional Islamic republic, and that per the Constitution, the president of Iran, if he dies in office, is replaced by the first vice president of Iran, who has already been named as the acting president. And under the Constitution, he will work together with the Speaker of the Majlis, or the parliament, and the head of the judiciary to form a committee which will oversee a presidential election in 50 days. So there is continuity of government. Iran is not a nation in decline, a nation collapsing, a nation in panic. It's doing its job. We know that the deputy foreign minister, who headed up the nuclear negotiations, is now the foreign minister. And so there is no lack of continuity in Iran's foreign policy. We know that the supreme leader has appealed to the Iranian people to remain calm, and they are remaining calm. And so, this is what we need to focus on. We should be asking questions about, because remember, Raisi is a man who was at the head of Iran prior to the Gaza conflict. So he's the man who has helped shape Iran's response. And he's gone. So what's the future leader of Iran? He's going to be inheriting something that was started by somebody else. BRICS. I can't, I can't overemphasize the importance of BRICS and the importance of Iran's participation in BRICS. And the foreign minister, together with the president, were working hard on, working with the Russians, working with the Chinese, working with other BRICS nations to, talk about building the kind of institutions that BRICS needs to build to become a viable international forum, able to compete with the likes of the G7 or the G20. Where does this go? This is the time when it's supposed to be happening. They just had an Islamic gathering in Kazan, which is where the BRICS forum is going to be held, where they discussed many of these issues. Some of them are going to carry over to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum that's going to take place in June. This is a disruption for Iran because critical decisions need to be made, and the major decision makers aren't there anymore. And deputies or acting people are loath to, to take responsibility without a full mandate given to them by the people of Iran, by the Iranian leadership. So, this is problematic on a whole number of fronts. It creates a lot of uncertainties in terms of what's going on in the world today. But the one thing that it doesn't create uncertainty for is the fact that Iran has a government. That government is in charge, and that government will continue to rule Iran per the constitution of Iran. We sometimes get caught up in the Western rhetoric that Iran is a theocracy and a dictatorship and all this, and we forget the reality that Iran is a functioning democracy with a constitution, and Iran will continue to govern per the Constitution. I think that's, at this point in time, until we get more information, that's what the focus of effort should be, is what do we know? And we know that, tragically, the president and the foreign minister and other senior Iranian officials are dead. But we also know that Iran is moving on constitutionally, that there is no guessing about what is happening in terms of the Iranian government. And then we just wait and see what the investigation shows, why this accident occurred, how it occurred, and what the fallout of that will be.
Now, you said 50 days, Scott. I mean, is the acting president, do you think that would be, soon to be the sitting president after the election, or is he a powerful figure? I can be honest with you here. I don't know much about the new acting president, but does he have a pretty good relationship before we just recently lost the president? I mean, were they close? I don't know much about them, like
Well, this isn't, Iran is it's not about being friends. Did Joe Biden pick his best friend to be vice president? No, it's about politics. The first vice president of Iran is appointed by the supreme leader, and the president is conferred by, the Guardian Council and and the parliament. So, this isn't a bosom buddy. This isn't some guy that's going to now position. He's the acting president of Iran, whose one job and only job is to organize an election within 50 days. He's not running for president. He's not going to be president. He doesn't want to be president. Or if he did, he's not going to do it this way. There's no way this man's running for president. He's not throwing his hat into the ring because that creates a whole host of issues. First of all, from a constitutional perspective, it means that there's a motive for the first vice president to want the president dead. What's your motive? Well, I get to run the election, and I get to have the inside thing. I get to be president. It's not how it works. He gets to run an election, and people will. The election will be what it always is. People will nominate, put in their nominations. The Guardian Council will vet these nominations, determine which candidates meet the criterion set forward by the Islamic Republic, and then they will hold an election. They'll have 30 days before the election to begin active campaigning, and the Iranian people will go to the polls and vote. I can pretty much, I hate to say guarantee because I'm not an Iranian, and there might be a clause in the Iranian constitution I'm unaware of, but I would put a lot of money on the fact that the acting president's name won't be on the ballot. That would stink to high heaven. So this man, he's a man who's part of the Expediency Council. That's a very powerful body within Iran. He's a man who he served as a guy who implemented the will of the Supreme Leader. He served on the Supreme Leader's Advisory Council. This is a man who knows the Islamic Republic. He has the resume in terms of, service during the Iran-Iraq War. He was a senior medical officer during that conflict, and so he clicks off that button. He's a man who has a great respect amongst the Iranian people and the Iranian government and the Iranian theocracy. And I believe that they have every confidence that he will, together with the Speaker of the Parliament, together with the head of the judiciary, put together an election. Again, let's go back to first principles about the Islamic Republic. This last, election that they had, that was problematic for them because of the low turnout. The Iranians have always said, and it dates back to the Ayatollah Khomeini, who said it's an essential for the Iranian people to participate in the election because the credibility of the system of government, the Islamic Republic, depends on the people's support of the government. And in this last election, the support, the participation in the election was at record lows. And so there's already, a feeling that the people aren't happy with the government. And the one way to guarantee the people become even less happy is to play stupid games with the politics. If the people believe that some sort of stupid games being played to sidestep democracy, this is a chance. This coming election is a chance for the Iranian theocracy, the Iranian government, to win back the support of the Iranian people. And let's be honest, they're going to be engaged in this election. The death of Ibrahim Raisi, you'll see the way the nation mourns him. Yes, in the West, we're going to talk about all the opponents and all that. But in Iran, I think you're going to see overwhelming support for this man and for the government. Remember, some important things have happened since the last election. Number one of which is Iran stood up to Israel. Iran stood up to Israel, and the Iranian people are going, all right, we got a leader that had a pair. Now he's gone. We need to get a leader in there that still has a pair. Iran's status in the world has gone up, dramatically because of BRICS, because of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So that's going to be on the table too. And Ibrahim Raisi was a man who was making strides, important strides in that direction. And so I think you're going to see a higher level of engagement of the Iranian people in this coming election, which means that whoever replaces Ibrahim Raisi will have a mandate that even Ibrahim Raisi didn't have, the support of the people. And if I understand this, I can guarantee you the Iranian government understands this. So again, back to the original nature of your question, I don't see any, inside politicking. I don't see any gamesmanship. I don't see any chess, grand 3D chess maneuvering by the acting president. I see him doing his job, and his job is to organize an election so that whoever becomes the next elected president has the full support of the Iranian people. And you can only have the full support of the Iranian people if they believe they have a role in the processes that, that elect people into the government. As the old saying is, you can only govern the governed if you have the consent of the governed. And it's important for the Iranian regime, for the theocracy, for the government to get the consent of the Iranian people.
It's really interesting. This weekend I had interviews here in the city, and I interviewed 3 ambassadors. One was from Serbia, the other was from Nicaragua, and the third was from Argentina. And I was rather puzzled at the start because I thought, are these ladies and gentlemen going to be very open with me, or are they just going to answer, a generic question with a generic answer? And all 3 of them were steadfastly behind, what Russia, as well as what China is doing business-wise, because Putin just was in China, and or pardon me, I got that right. Didn't I get that right? Yes, I got that right. So, and sorry, a lot of news flow going on in this country right now, and we had a very busy weekend here. We had 9 ambassadors or 10 ambassadors in total here. But what struck me is the attitude towards each of these countries were very, it was like they were all in this challenge together. And I was quite surprised when they were mentioning, I've listened to conversations from ambassadors before. Mostly you would get a pretty safe, generic answer. The Nicaraguan ambassador who chatted with me, and we'll see the interview here, I think, on our channel in a couple of days, he was saying, look, the Americans put tariffs on cars in China, that are coming from China. They're killing their consumers. And to see this type of confidence from even small countries to say, you know what, we're going to be okay right now. We're going to go along with the whether it's BRICS or the One Belt, One Road. I could see the energy in the ambassador from Nicaragua, where he was just saying, this is what China is coming here. We're building a brand new international airport, and just sitting listening to the guy for 50 minutes, you're getting totally amped up and excited to see what these guys are doing with their countries. And then we flip to Europe. And, we hear in the media there, and I interviewed the Serbian, I think she was the deputy ambassador, and she actually watches these shows. She knows you, Scott. She knows you, Carl. She knows Daniel Dumbrell. She was reading off all these names, and I was like, wow, okay, well, got to check me out. So, but just hearing the way she talked, and it was like, these countries have got their confidence, Scott and Carl, and they've got their confidence back. And is this something new for, the world to not fear the United States? Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, they don't feel intimidated by the Americans anymore. Do you guys notice that?
We're in a multipolar world now, Alex. I mean, there's no the unipolar moment of U.S. hyperpower is gone. That era is gone and never returning. And right now, it's just China that's offering investment and infrastructure all over the world, including in Latin America, which United States consider its backyard. And U.S. is spreading pretty thin right now. It's spreading thin in battlefield in Ukraine. It's getting deep. It's getting dragged back into the Middle East by Israeli actions. And it's still trying to stir up waters in South China Sea against China. But, the spirit might be willing, but the flesh is weak. The imperial flesh is pretty flaccid at this point. And I think people can see that. A lot of people in the West, particularly United States, they still think, for example, Chinese growth depending on the Western market, depending on the U.S. That's not true. If you just look at the trade data, the trade data shows that the Chinese exports has been surging to the global South. The Chinese trade with Latin America, with Africa, with Southeast Asia, etc., are now surpassing its trade in total with United States and EU. And that trend is not reversing. So the China's trade with integration with the rest of the world is continuing, is deepening, and U.S. is just not as important as it used to be, and it also lost all moral credibility with its stance on the Israeli conflict ongoing.
One question I wanted to ask you, both of you gentlemen, Sergei Lavrov made a comment that he said that Europe and Russia's relationship is done for a generation. I mean, Scott, you were in Russia. Your thoughts on his comment by saying, you know, he feels the relationship with Europe and Russia is done for a generation, or going to maybe take more than a generation to repair itself? Do you think it will ever repair itself?
Well, it has no choice. I mean, let's just put things in perspective here. I'm sure there's many times in history we could have said, well, the relationship between X country and Y country is irreparable, you know, but then time heals everything. And so, you know, Europe, I think it was Lavrov and Putin who said you can't choose your neighbors. They're there. So, you know, whether Russia likes Europe or not, or whether Europe likes it, doesn't matter. They're there. You can't redraw that map. That's the reality, baby. And so they're going to have to learn to live together. But Europe, you know, the day of Europe dictating outcomes is over for now. And since Europe's only in a dictating mode, you know, it makes it difficult for the idea of Europe and Russia doing business. But they will, because Europe is going to find out. Let me go back and talk a little bit. You know, Carl, I agree 100% that America's economy is struggling and America's moral authority is shredded. We can still kick everybody's ass. I just want people to understand that. There's not a nation out there that we can't destroy overnight. We opt not to because it's bad business and it's suicidal. But all these nations out there talking big, every single one of those ambassadors understands that America could crush them like a bug should we choose so. And we can do that economically by imposing sanctions if we want to go to economic war. But we're in a political silly season here. Economic war means there's going to be belt tightening in America, and voters don't like to tighten their belt in an election year. But if you want a war with America, we will kill you all, because that's what we do better than anybody else. And so all these people talk about the collapse of the American empire, this, that, and the other. Be careful. We may be going down. We can take everybody with us. And did you just hear Lindsey Graham? We had
I heard him.
People. Okay, we can laugh about it.
I'm not laughing about that.
That's the mentality that exists in America. You push us hard enough, we will nuke you. We have a doctrine that says preemptive use of nuclear weapons anytime we want to. So push us into a corner at your own risk. We will lash back. We will destroy everything. This is why I am working so hard to try and repair relations and to try and get people to seek alternative means in pushing America into the corner. Because we may be not what we used to be, but, you know, in July, Mike Tyson is going to get in the ring with some wannabe boxer. And Tyson's going to destroy him. America's Mike Tyson. We're a little bit old, a little bit, you know, we don't have what we used to have. We'll kick your ass. Straight up kick your ass, because we're fighters. Everybody's out there, well, America couldn't do this because we didn't want to. We didn't put everything into it. Do you honestly think that we couldn't have flattened Afghanistan? Do you really think that we left Afghanistan because we got our asses handed to us? We left Afghanistan because of a political decision. We could have put 400,000 troops in Afghanistan and leveled the whole place, killed millions of people. We have the ability to do that. We have the ability to do that to any nation in the world except Russia and China, because they can nuke us, but we'll flatten both of them while they flatten us. I mean, do we really want to head down that direction into discussion? This is why I always tell people to really be careful, because I agree, America's got economic issues. We're still strong enough to strangle the Chinese economy, and the Chinese know that. That's why China is taking it very easy, because they know that if America goes to economic warfare with China, both sides are going to pay a horrific price. And for China, that's put so much into building these global supply chains and building these economic relations, that would be disastrous. It doesn't mean we destroy China, but it means that everything China's worked for is gone. And China doesn't operate that way. I don't think China, you know I've been to Vegas and I've seen the Chinese gamblers in the high stakes room where they put a lot of chips on the table. But I don't think the Chinese government is composed of high stake gamblers. I think they're very pragmatic people who are looking for pragmatic solutions that maintain a consistent positive outcome. China's not about to go, screw it, let's do this, baby. They're not America. See, America's fully capable of doing what I do. Get angry, Oh, let's do it. Kill you. The Chinese are like, we don't want to do that. We'd like to remain a little bit calm. We can smile. We really prefer that. The second the Chinese try to do the American thing, bluff and do this, screw it, man. We're in a boxing match and we're Mike Tyson and we got the knockout punch. You may get lucky and hit us, but we're taking you down too. This is why I always remind people, stop pretending that America ain't a superpower. We are a superpower. We got more diplomatic influence in the world than anybody. Russia's on the ascendancy. We know. We see Russia go to Africa, and Russia does this, that, and the other thing. But Russia gets away with it not because of Russian power, but because of Russian prestige. Russia actually has diplomats that know how to talk to people and behave well and all that stuff. America can go, we can twist arms. Look at all the votes we get at the UN. I know how that works. I was at the UN. I know the phone calls that are made. I know the pressure that's put on people. See, we can still get the votes, and we can still kick the hell out of anybody on this planet. Now, you may take us down too, Russia, China. I get it. But there's no one else out there that could take us down. If we opted to take out, again, for the Iranians, I'm glad you stood up. I'm glad you stood for something. But you do, Iran does understand that if America hit the on switch, Iran's gone. It doesn't stand a chance against us. No one stands a chance against us if we truly decide to bring the total might of America forward. But that's an all-in. That's Texas Hold'em. That's, I think I'm looking at a royal flush here, all in. America gambles that way irresponsibly. I'm not defending what America's doing. I'm just saying that you're playing with a gambler, and we're willing to go all in. What nations are willing to go all in against us? Not many, because they're not suicidal. All in means you win or you lose. But how many times can you go all in? Eventually, the odds are going to be against you. Eventually, what you think you have is someone's going to have a better hand. America's irresponsible, grossly irresponsible. How do you deal with a grossly irresponsible, adult that can cause a lot of damage? Very carefully, very carefully. And
well,
China's done that.
I don't think U.S. is a. I don't think anybody characterize U.S. as an adult in the room. U.S. is more like the baby in possession of semi-automatic weapons, and everyone is trying to handle him with very careful, like kid gloves.
But Carl, we're not. But Carl, let's please. We're not a baby. Okay, we conquered the fucking world. Remember that? We did it in World War II. I know Russia's saying we beat the Germans. We beat the Japanese and the Germans at the same time. It was the American arsenal of democracy that did that. Now, we can sit there and pick it apart. I'm not saying that this is the epitome of good, but we are the fucking adults. We wrote the rules-based international order. No child wrote that shit. We governed the world for 7 to 8 decades. We dominated it. We are an old arthritic adult, but we're not children. We've played this game. We've won this game, and we believe we can win this game again. And so people need to stop treating America as if it's some sort of child or this. We're grown-ass adults, and the world that's in there right now, people are trying to change. They're trying to change the world we built. Now, I'm glad they're trying to change it because I think the world we built isn't a good world. But we built it. We own it. We think we run it. And that's the way people have to start treating, because this is the way, Carl, I'm pushing back, because we have a nation full of Lindsey Grahams who are in power. And this insane man is talking about nuclear weapons. All right, so we can sit here and play, try and belittle it. We're going to nuke you. I'm just warning the world there. That man is that thinking. Look what the Secretary of Defense. Had I been the Secretary of Defense, I would have said, Lindsey Graham, you're insane. There's no way in God's name I'm ever going to justify the use of nuclear weapons. What we did against Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a crime. It was a political act. It wasn't about defeating Japan. If there was no existential issue there, we're simply trying to make a message to Moscow. But we learned our lesson, Mr. Senator. That's why we believe in arms control, but we don't, because we have a preemptive nuclear doctrine. But he should have pushed back and told Lindsey Graham he's insane. Do we have a right to tell it? We have a right to tell anybody anything. We're America. We can tell you, you don't have to listen. But our existential interests are more important than Israel's existential interests. And as an American, I will never let Israel dictate outcomes to us. Israel can defend itself. If they think they can do it without us, let them do it without us. But as long as we're a major player, this is what I've told Graham, be real about it. But that Lloyd Austin was just this pathetic, politicized nothing who couldn't even give an answer. He was just all over the map. Are you glad we got out of Afghanistan? The answer is, you're damn right I'm glad we got out of Afghanistan. That was a disaster. And one of the reasons why it was a disaster, Senator Graham, is you. See, he should have pushed back and told Graham, you're the problem. You're the madman. But no, that's not how America works. Graham and a whole bunch of people like him are up there in their power seats, and they're bullying people like Lloyd Austin into rubber stamping dangerous policy. This is a very dangerous time we live in, and America needs to be treated not like a child. Because remember, the automatic weapons that you accuse the child of having, we built them, we designed them, we've used them. We know what we're doing. We're not a child.
Let me try to give this a. Let me try to give this a little bit of a twist. Okay, Scott, thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate that. But I have something to say about this, and it's not at America. It's at a country that I've been here for 4 years, and I can tell you if this country, not by America, I'm just saying by any other country, if the country just outside my window behind me is pushed against the wall, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, there are probably no less than 80,000 factories behind me here. Overnight, those factories, whether they're making baby strollers or new energy vehicles, they could easily be in the military game and making weapons without a shadow of a doubt. Carl, I think you know that. I think you understand it. And the infrastructure that is in place here has to be in some way looked at in detail to understand that this is a country that can mobilize. And let's bring Russia into this for a moment, okay? And this is where it could get interesting, because the Western countries are accusing China of supplying Russia with arms. Is that a fair accusation? And then I can go on with my point. Is it fair that some of the Western governments feel that China is supporting Russia with some arms in some way?
China is not supplying. I don't think China is supplying weapons to Russia.
Let's say it's not. Let's say it's not weapons. Let's just say materials. Can I use the word materials?
I mean, China having a normal trade relationship with Russia. They're not selling military items. Right? I mean, right now, United States qualifying garlic as a national security issue from China. Any kind of materials export from China to Russia is materially supporting Russia in the war, in the minds of U.S. Congress. Okay, so when you say material, you have to be very careful what kind of material you're talking about.
I'll try. Let me back up and try to explain this again. My point is, whatever China is moving to Russia has not and cannot be, to this day, impacted unless there's a military, exercise going on, or if somebody came in here and tried to bomb this country. No matter what sanctions, tariffs, trade bans, don't trade with these guys, we're going to hurt you. It's still going on. Scott, your point about America can still kick everybody's ass. I get it. But China still has the ability to move whatever, we'll call it, with a country like Russia. They can move, they can trade. It's not impacted. 10 years ago, that's a different story. It's a different story, Carl. You know that. 10
Alex,
years ago.
You're missing the point, Alex. All those factories you talked about won't exist. They won't exist. China won't exist. The world won't exist. This is the point I'm trying to make. I'm not sitting here talking about America conventionally beating China. What I'm trying to say is that the moment the Lindsey Grahams have control of the nuclear arsenal of America, and he has an influence, he's on the Armed Services Committee, and we decide that those Chinese factories become an existential threat to the United States, that if we wait a day longer, that those Chinese factories linked up with Russia means that we've lost and America's going down, we'll nuke you. And that's what I'm worried about. And this is
I
the
get
point
you.
I'm
I
trying
get
to
it.
make to everybody. This is about Top Gun. I'm reading the comment. Top Gun. I'm not saying that we're going to come in with our fighter pilots and shoot you down. I'm saying we're going to push a button, and Trident submarine missiles out of Ohio-class submarines are going to rain death and destruction down on targets, and it's all over at that point. This is the point I'm trying to make. This is why China, Alex, this is why China doesn't do what you're saying. This is why Carl's right. They have normal economic relations. China is not going to do anything that causes America to panic. China is a very pragmatic, responsible nation who knows that they're on a good path right now. But my concern is that America is going to wake up one morning and they're going to say, we feel like this is out of control. We're going to lose, and so we need to level the play. And China's in a bad position right now because they have a very limited nuclear arsenal. They don't have a survivable second strike capacity. America could take China off the map, and unless China's linked in with Russian retaliation, it's over for China. Literally, if
I would have to say it's. I'd have to say it's over.
I'd have to say a good thing. I know this is against your professional training, Scott, because you're in the stopping the you're the anti-proliferation business. But this is where I believe nuclear weapon is actually a weapon for peace. If you look at the example of North Korea got the nukes. Guess what? Gaddafi, Saddam both got rid of their nuclear stockpile. What happened to them? Kim Jong-il is going strong as ever. And this is why Iran should have nuclear weapons. If Iran have nukes, Israel would have think twice about striking Iranian targets. So this, if everybody have nukes, this world might be a safer place, precisely because the U.S. politicians are insane, like some Lindsey Graham. And I'm right. I mean, you're right. The U.S. have far more nuclear stockpile than China. But I believe the 400 nuclear warheads in China, it might not be able to glass United States from sea to shining sea, but you will take out all the major U.S. cities. And we both know if all the U.S. major cities are gone, the United States will cease to exist as an entity, political entity.
Carl,
because it's about MAD, right? Mutual assured destruction. And the one thing you're right, Scott. United States was, the preeminent power. It's still in many ways preeminent power in the world. But at the end of the World War II, United States contributed about over 50% of the world GDP. That's no longer the case. The trend is not going the U.S. favor. I mean, you're absolutely correct. U.S. politicians are crazy. The United States have still overwhelming power of arsenal at its disposal, but the trend line is going the other direction. Right now, if you look at the Navy, the shipbuilding capabilities, right? In World War II, United States outproduced everybody in terms of pumping up warships. Today, if you look at the top shipbuilding countries in the world, 2022, China contribute to 46.59% of all the shipbuilding capability around the world. And that's followed by South Korea, Japan, and United States is not even in the top 15 countries. This is why U.S. Navy have to go to South Korea and Japan in order to help with the naval buildup. This is not the world of 1950s anymore. This is a point where the U.S. politicians like Lindsey Graham, they do not understand. That world is gone. That world is disappearing very fast. It's true, United States is still insanely powerful and it's ruled by insane people who will probably nuke the world and end the civilization as we know it. But the trend as it currently exists is trending in the other direction. And China and Russia, they play a very rational game. They're not provoking United States into a war, all-out nuclear exchange. They are doing it very carefully to maximize their own sphere of influence, while eclipsing the U.S. power at all across the globe. So I think we're not really talking about a pending nuclear apocalypse right now. We're talking about a world trend that's trending away from the U.S. dominance. I mean, I think we all agree on the main point. We may just disagree on little bit details. Okay, Alex, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's good that we're having this conversation. I want to have this conversation and understand, what we're dealing with here. I was quite set back from hearing Lindsey Graham talk like that. Like, I've heard him talk before, but it just keeps getting a little bit more bizarre as I listen to him, and a little bit, to be honest with you, a little bit frightening. Scott, I get your point.
I'm saying what I'm saying, Alex.
I get it.
It's my job to bring reality to the table.
Yes,
Carl, I agree with
agree.
everything you said about the trending. We're in agreement. But anybody who doesn't believe, I'm telling you right now, Lindsey Graham sits on the Armed Services Committee that sits down and has continuity government exercises, and they have a plan. The United States right now is preparing to fight and win a nuclear war. Carl, is China preparing to fight and win a nuclear war? Nope. Is Russia preparing to fight and win a nuclear war? Nope. Both Russia and China say our nuclear weapons are a force of deterrence, meaning that if you nuke us, we will hit you back strong and would take care about mutually assured destruction. We're beyond that, Carl. This is what I'm trying to tell you. We believe that we can fight and win a nuclear war. And right now we have people that say, what level of, you say you'll hit some cities. We're willing to say we can accept that and survive. We're willing to say that we can preserve enough American civilization that we will be the dominant post-nuclear. You can laugh, Carl. This is how we think. We did it in the 60s. We did it in the 70s. We did it in the 80s. We walked away from it, but it's coming back today. And this is a dangerous mindset. When you have the Lindsey Grahams of the world sitting in secret in Congress, working with the Pentagon, Lloyd Austin, saying, okay, if between Russia and China, if they take out 70% of America, but we preserve 30%, but we take out 80% of them, we emerge in a post-conflict world as the dominant power. That's the way we think, Carl. And this is why I'm saying America needs to be treated not like a nation in decline, but like a very dangerous nation in decline. What we need is Mike Tyson not to be brought back in the ring when he's in his 50s, but to keep Mike Tyson out of the ring until he's in his 80s, and it doesn't matter. But to provoke America right now is like provoking Mike Tyson today. I wouldn't want to provoke Mike Tyson. He has a hell of a knockout punch.
But how can we say that these countries are provoking America? I don't think there's anybody at this point provoking America. I think they understand the consequences of getting into a massive conflict with America. But what are people supposed to do? What are nations supposed to do? Scott,
shut up and just do it. Okay, America, again, this is my point. Just shut up. You don't have to sit there and say America's weak enough, because Lindsey Graham's listening to that, and then he gets panicked, and then he picks up the phone, talks to Tom Cotton. Did you hear what the Chinese said about us? We're weak. Well, we're not weak. We have to prove we're not weak. And the next thing you know, they're going, because then Carl's going to be called in and said, we can build more ships than you, and our economy is better, and we have this and that. And they're going to go, holy cow, we lost. We have to take everybody down now. We have to even the playing field with the only weapon we have left. And this isn't a joke anymore. This is why I get so impassioned. Alex, I didn't invent nuclear disarmament today. You know me. I've been around forever saying it. This is why I've been saying it, because we are rapidly approaching the point of no return. We are rapidly approaching that point, and everybody's treating America as if it's a joke. We're not a damn joke. We're insane with nuclear weapons, and we think we own the world.
I play Fallout. I know how you all turn out. For people who don't know, Fallout is a new post-nuclear apocalypse playing game. I knew how I highly recommend the Amazon Fallout TV series about what happened to United States after it gets nuked. So, we all know United States is absolutely insane. China and Russia leadership definitely understand that. Most people in the world understand that. And this is why right now, United States and China actually in the midst of a war, of an economic war. United States is waging economic war against China right now. But China has been very careful not to fully escalate to a tit versus tat situation. If United States is placing tariff on the Chinese product, the Chinese didn't do the same against American companies. Alex, we had this conversation before because China plays a different game. China is welcoming U.S. companies, including the likes of Bill Gates and Elon Musk, to visit China to show the Western companies that China is open to business, even if United States is engaged in this economic war against China. So China plays a very, very different game, and this is where U.S. may be crazy. But China play for the long game. So I don't think we're in the danger of a pending nuclear apocalypse anytime soon. Lindsey Graham can film in the Congress, they can pose for the camera, etc. But at the end of the day, I still believe Lindsey Graham want to cash out all his corrupt money and go retire comfortably somewhere, maybe in the Bahamas. I don't know. But Scott, I go ahead,
Scott. What has changed here in the last couple of weeks? Because something's changed here. Because, before we would talk and I would try to understand, some geopolitical issues going on in the world here. But clearly, you're picking up something that I have not seen. And it's clear in this conversation, you're seeing something more or feeling something more about this than maybe this whole audience is not aware of. And you're pretty passionate about it. And is there something that we're not, is there something that we're not
getting is nuclear war. You're not getting nuclear war. You're not understanding. This is the point. I see. I'm pissed off at the world right now. I'm pissed off at the American people. Why?
Okay.
Because I've been talking about the danger of nuclear. Carl, we are on the precipice of a nuclear annihilation. I have to disagree with you and I have to push back. See, the mindset that we're not means that we can continue to go about business as usual. And from a Chinese and Russian perspective, I mean, things are looking pretty good. China's got control, it's doing well economically. It's in the driver's seat. And they're looking at the trajectory saying, that's pretty good. Russia's looking at what's going on. They're feeling pretty comfortable about all this. And America's sitting there going, we're getting our asses kicked, which I think is a good thing. I don't mind it. We need to adjust to a multipolarity reality. We can't be the global hegemon anymore. But I've been warning people from day one that we have a nuclear doctrine that is so detached from reality, it's not even funny. We have a nuclear doctrine that is becoming the fallback position of the lunatics in charge. And the reason why I decided to speak out is I want everybody to get scared. And the fact that nobody's getting scared, Alex, it's over at this point. I'm trying to tell you, we are this close to the world ending. It could end right now. It could end that quick. When you have French politicians saying to Russia, we got 200 nuclear weapons. Why would you say that? Are you saying that if Russia attacked French troops in Ukraine, that you'd be willing to use nuclear weapons? Because all you did is guarantee that Russia now changes its nuclear posture to deal with that. And since those weapons now and bring in NATO, you have the United States. I'm trying to tell people right now, there was a time when we sent out Ohio-class submarines in the not too distant past, and the warheads didn't have targets loaded into them. We detargeted them as part of preventing, any mistakes. We didn't want accidents to happen. Every single one of those weapons has a target today. Every single weapon. And they can operate autonomously. And each submarine's capable of taking out, half a country. And we got several of them in the field right now deployed. I'm not talking about the 400 Minuteman IIIs. We don't, 20% of which probably won't launch because they're old. But we're talking about Americans going to spend, hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars to upgrade this arsenal. This isn't a joke. This is, I'm trying to put the warning out there that America is panicked, as our government is in panic mode. And I'm also here to tell you, Carl, did you hear what Donald Trump said when he talked about, how he was going to solve the problem if he becomes president? What he's going, and we can smile about it because we sit there and go, well, the man's insane. He's the man in charge of a nuclear arsenal that's ready to be used at a moment's notice. Maybe Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump because, as the Russians like to say, he's predictable. And that the Russians and the Chinese know that they can, as bad as Joe Biden is, as bad as the American government is, under Joe Biden, at least Tony Blinken is listening, and going through the motions. You get an idiot like Donald Trump in who doesn't want to listen anymore, wants to dictate. And that's the problem. When the president of the United States starts dictating and people don't listen, he's put himself into a corner where he either backs down, but if you're starting to dictate, major outcomes and you back down, that means you've surrendered as a nation. He can't do that. Or then you have to step up to the plate. And the only thing we have left to step up to the plate with is nuclear weapons. This is what I'm trying to explain to people. As long as America has nuclear weapons under the current policy posture, under our current conditions, because we're a failing nation right now. We're failing. But we have the ability to make everybody else fail too. And we are arrogant enough to believe, as long as America says we are the essential power, that the world revolves around us, that without us, the world can't survive. And we believe this. And then people start to create a world that says we can survive without you, we can thrive without you. That makes us then behave irrationally. And we are a nation with nuclear weapons, with Lindsey Graham's and Donald Trump's in the wings right there. That's what's changed, Alex, is that the world, I think, is becoming too cocky about too cocky about the strength of China. I mean, Carl, you're right. Everything you said is right. China's strong. China's powerful. Alex, you guys got these factories. China is a remarkable nation. They're doing remarkable things. And left to their own devices, without nuclear annihilation, China's going to be in a position to be the major player in the world in the coming decades. But if not now, already. But the point is, America still exists. We haven't gone away, and we have a nuclear arsenal that we have people in Washington, D.C. today talking about resuming testing of nuclear weapons. Why? Because they're afraid that the weapons designs that we have won't work when we need them to work, and we need them to work right now. And they no longer care about the consequences, because things have become of an existential nature across the board, where we have no choice. The only thing we have left is nuclear weapons. And so we have people talking about doing nuclear testing. We deployed the W-76-2 usable nuclear weapon, a low-yield nuclear weapon on the Trident submarine. Why? On the Trident missile. Why? To use it. It's called a usable nuke for a reason. We plan on using it. And so we need
Scott, can you tell me again what it was? What was it? The W what?
W-76-2.
Okay.
It's a low-yield nuclear warhead that's been put on the Trident missile. And not only that, and I think 2019, the Secretary of Defense went to Omaha, Nebraska, to Strategic Command, where they had a war game where he took control of the simulated launch procedures to fire a W-76-2 equipped Trident missile against Russian forces in a simulated attack against the Baltics. So we're no longer attacking Nation Orange or Nation this. We're actually saying we're hitting the Russians here. And I can guarantee you that we have war plans and op plans to talk about hitting the Chinese too. We have a preemptive nuclear strike plan against China. If China starts flexing the muscles in the South China Sea, there are ports that we plan on hitting preemptively, because we believe in escalate to de-escalate. We believe that if we use a nuclear weapon, we can intimidate the Chinese. We can intimidate the Russians. It's insanity, because I don't believe the Chinese or the Russians are going to be intimidated by American nuclear weapons use. And so they will fire against American cities, and then we will retaliate by leveling, and then we all die. And that's the outcome I'm trying to prevent.
Scott, the United States has behaved basically the same since 1950s. I mean, the Chinese knows this, Russian knows this. I like to quote Mao on what he said about nuclear war. This is what Mao said. He said the atomic bomb is a paper tiger, which the U.S. reactionaries used to scare people. It looks terrible, but in fact, it isn't. Of course, atomic bomb is a weapon of mass slaughter. But the outcome of a war is decided by people, not by one or two new type of weapons. He said in 1950, 1946, right? This is way before China had its own nuclear weapons. And then in 1950s, he said this: the atomic bomb can only be used against big objects or targets such as big cities, industrial complexes, naval vessels concentrating in large numbers. The bomb will definitely inflict heavy damage on these targets. It is, however, of no use in ground war, no matter how concentrated man's forces or military materials are. This is because although the use of atomic bomb at the front may kill combat personnel in the open field, the force underground and in the rear will survive the attack and continue to operate. It will cost a great deal of money to launch numerous massive nuclear assault on either front or small cities, railway station, and other target. And he also said, even if this kills 300 million of us, we still have many people left. So I mean, United States believe in the madman theory, right? So you have to be a madman if you're like, look, okay, you know what? You're crazy. We're crazy too. Let's end the world together, right? You got
listen.
Let's end the human civilization right now. I know how you all turn out. I play the game Fallout. Everybody gets nuked. Everybody go back to the Stone Ages. If that's the outcome we can all agree on, let's do it. Let's fucking do this. But that's not gonna happen, man. I just don't think that's gonna happen. We all understand U.S. politicians are crazy to talk a big game, but guess what? In the end of the day, I think they value their own life and the lives of their families more than they value their money most of all. So I don't think that's going to happen.
Let me, I brought up a map and I'll let Scott deal with that answer. I'm sure it's going to be an exciting response. Hold tight, Scott. I brought up this map here, and this is a simulation. If anybody wants to see it, just look up nuke map on Google. I've got something loaded here, but this is Beijing, and this is with a W-76 with 100 kilotons. And if detonated, surface or air burst, I'm not an expert at this, but this gives us an idea of the casualties with just one of these, okay? And it's estimating 178,590 fatalities and 474,620. I mean,
you do know, Alex, that we don't drop one bomb. I'm just letting you know.
I know that.
Beijing will be hit with somewhere in the area of 25 to 30 nuclear weapons.
And this is why I'm bringing this up here, is to just show you that, Carl, I get your point.
Listen. Mao called U.S. bluff in the Korean War. In the 1950s, before China even had nuclear weapons, MacArthur threatened to drop 30 nukes in Manchuria to completely glass the area bordering North Korea. So there will be no Chinese supplies going to North Korea. While Mao still sent a 300,000 strong Chinese volunteer army into North Korea, the United States did not drop the bomb.
Because Korea wasn't an existential issue to American survival.
Exactly. And Korea, that applies to all the peripheries, I would argue all the Western Pacific. How is an island, little reef in South China Sea existential to the survival of the United States? Nobody.
And as long as you keep the debate on that small little island, you're 100% correct, Carl. But now you start throwing in China control of global supply chains, the economy, strangling, de-dollarization, and now you're looking at the existential survival of America, and that's where I look. If you think you can call our bluff, go ahead. I'll oppose you, because I believe that there's going to be a nuclear war, and I'm going to do everything I can to stop a nuclear war. But if you want to, maybe you're right. Call the bluff. Maybe nothing will happen. But if you're wrong, Carl, it's all over.
Mao called America's bluff in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and we had Nixon going to China. Why? Because Mao said, you know what? I can be crazier than you. You know what? You're crazy. You want to drop nuclear weapons? You want to start a nuclear war? Let's bring it out. Let's do it. And United States.
I don't think Mao ever said that to America, Carl. To be honest.
Mao said U.S. nuclear weapon is a paper tiger. And he
Right,
said
but
United States
did he ever threaten the existential survival of America? Did Mao embark on a
I
policy?
mean, that's not how only United States threaten existential threaten existence of other states. You know, other states don't care if United States thrive or survive on its own, because they care more about their own survivability of their own people, right? I mean, but the thing is, Mao said nuclear weapon is just a bogus man. It's not going to happen, and he was right. Nagasaki and Hiroshima was the last time the nuclear weapons were used.
But Carl, this is a different China, and this is a different America. This is 2024, and I think that we are on two completely different playing fields. I mean, you go back 30, 40 years. I mean, this outside this window is farmland. I mean, it's a completely different story. There's a lot at stake here on both sides. I totally agree, you know, and I can see both of you guys as offsetting. I don't want to use the word argument, because we're on this video or live stream to have a discussion, to try to educate people and help them understand what they're up against. But I don't think that we can sit back after listening to some of these senators. Yeah, you know, some of them puff out their chests, Carl, but some of them have managed to convince a government to pump in $250 billion for a very serious conflict in the Ukraine. That's a lot of money. And go back 20 years, you try to tell me that they'd pump in probably more than that. 300 billion, 400 billion, $500 billion. This is I feel that we're in a completely different day and age when, you know, my father was in the military, and, you know, if I talked, you know, he passed away about 20 years ago, but from my recent conversations before he died, the world wasn't boiling like it is now. And I feel that I mean, we just saw 2 months ago a few hundred missiles fly into Israel, right? Yeah. Did you when we started 2024, if I told you the Iranians would slam 300 missiles into Israel, would you believe me? It's a question for you, Carl. Carl.
Yeah, I'm listening. I mean,
we're seeing some crazy things here. And it will take just one.
Did that escalate? Did that escalate? I mean,
it could have.
It could have. Everything could have escalated. Everything could have led to a World War III, but it hasn't. I mean, that's a state people were living in throughout the entirety of the Cold War. People were expecting something could trigger a world-ending event, but it didn't happen. It did not happen for 70 years. Why would why was this time different? Right? I mean,
okay, let me go back. World War II. Did we know there would be a World War II before there was a World War II? I think the point that we're seeing here, and I'm understanding, if I'm trying to read both of you gentlemen,
there was no nuclear weapons before World War II. I mean, the nuclear weapons do make a big difference. This is where I say nukes is a forceful piece. Everyone should have nukes. Everyone should have nukes because U.S. is crazy. So if everyone have nukes, U.S. will have to think twice about throwing its power around, because then you know there will be consequences that U.S. may not. You know, right now U.S. go into these wars do not pose existential threat to the United States. Afghanistan was not an existential threat. Iraq war was an existential threat. Libya, Middle East was an existential threat. But if all these countries had nuclear weapons, United States would have to think twice about getting into the situations. And this is why I'm not I am all for proliferation. I think everybody should have nukes.
So Scott, how do we get out of this mess? I know you said we should just keep our mouth shut, but how do we really de-escalate this and get people back on and trying to? I know you're trying to, you know, you're very passionate about getting the message out and, you know, warning people that shit could get real quick. I mean, how do we de-escalate, get out of this, back out of it? You know, is there a way out?
I would say that if Carl's option of proliferation took place, then that's the end of the world. Carl, I know America's nuclear strategy. I used to be one of them. Okay, I planned nuclear war. I've been there. You're wrong. I know you believe that Mao's quotation about American and nuclear weapons being a paper tiger, and you believe in that and all that. But when we decide to use nuclear weapons, we will use them, and we'll use them decisively. And my goal is to make sure that we never get to that decision point. And my goal, one of the ways that we don't get to that decision point, is to pursue nuclear nonproliferation so that we de-emphasize nuclear weapons. You see, I'm seeing today too much bleed over between deterrence policy and warfighting policy. Right now, see, as long as you keep warfighting deterrence policy separate, nuclear weapons are a force of peace, as you say. That's one of the ideas, is that by having nuclear weapons, you prevent nuclear weapons from being used. But the United States has allowed warfighting strategies to blend in with deterrence strategies so that we no longer talk about pure deterrence. Now deterrence takes on a warfighting thing. And unless you've studied that, Carl, and I would advise you do that, study American nuclear warfighting policies. Go in and take a look at not the theory, but the reality, the practicality of where our nuclear weapons are, how they're linked to operational planning, and what the triggers are for the employment of nuclear weapons. I know this. And I'm here to say right now, it scares the living crap out of me, because all
Scott,
it takes
this is
is
why.
one mistake.
This is why you have said China's nuclear arsenal is not big enough for deter U.S. This is why China should have 1,000 nuclear warheads. 400 nuclear warheads is enough. Have a couple thousand. Russia has more than 1,000 nukes, and I think that would be enough. By having a couple thousand nuclear warheads aiming at the United States, that would be enough to deter the United States. This is why I think more nukes, the better. I mean, for China, China
Carl,
should
we did
expand
that.
its
But Carl, I don't know how old you are. It's none of my business. You're obviously a grown adult and you've been around. I've been around when we did this nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union, back when we had 30,000 nuclear weapons and we're talking about building more. There's no such thing as enough nuclear weapons, Carl. There's no such thing as enough nuclear weapons.
If I leave the screen for 2 minutes, you guys can get along?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We'll behave. Don't worry.
No,
I'm only. You're probably just like 10 years older than me, Scott. I lived through the end of the Cold War. I was.
I think I'm the oldest one here. Okay, I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Right, but I was involved in the planning of using nuclear weapons, and I think that's a difference between you and I. See, for you, nuclear weapons are purely a theoretical thing. I know they're not. I know that they're a practical reality, and I worked really hard at a time to get nuclear weapons out of the war-fighting mindset of America, to be part of the team that went in there and started to get rid of nuclear weapons, to emphasize arms control, to de-emphasize this. And that's why we've seen, a drop in the numbers of nuclear weapons from 30,000 down to 1,554, whatever the deployable nuclear weapons are today. It's still too many. Back when we first started doing nuclear war planning, 400 was enough to destroy the world. I would say we need probably more than that now, because the target set is diversified, but 1,500 is enough to destroy the whole. Plus, remember, we have a whole bunch in reserve. The New START Treaty didn't take all the nuclear weapons, the warheads out, just the delivery systems, but we can build delivery systems and get the warheads put out there. I personally, to be honest, I think China has to build more nuclear weapons. Why? Because there's a disparity between China and the United States that makes meaningful arms control virtually impossible, because America is not going to willingly cut down weapons to become the equal of China. China will have to build up to become the equal of the United States. But then at that point in time, once they reach parity, that's when we have to sit there and say, now that we've become equal, how do we bring it back down? Because the alternative to that, if you say parity, nobody wants parity. Once you get into a nuclear arms race, everybody will be going. And it's not just about the numbers of weapons, it's about the quality of weapons, the deliverability of weapons, the lethality of the weapons. This is why we have multiple independently targeted warheads, because we decided that rather than have one missile and one missile, we take one missile and put 10 warheads on it. Then they took one missile, put 18 warheads on it. And next thing we knew, it was insane. And we were in this endless cycle that both the United States and Soviet Union went, this is not sustainable. One accident, we're all going to die. I lived through that. So I would prefer not to go back in that direction. I would prefer not to get lucky again, because I think we got lucky. I think that we avoided a nuclear conflict that could have easily have happened. I don't want to get into the situation where both sides are leaning forward on building nuclear weapons that are designed to overcome an enemy's defenses. And that's our mindset, where warfighting dominates deterrence. And then a mistake happens, a miscalculation happens, and we go to war again. So that's why I want to bring these weapons back down and all that. Are we bluffing? I don't know. Is it worth calling the American bluff on this?
Well, Scott, you made just a perfect argument for nuclear weapons. Why did U.S. and Soviet Union sit down to have the arms treaty? Because they both realized this is progressing to a dangerous and ultimately non-productive outcome. And right now, precisely because United States that you can have impunity or okay, Kai-Ching. Because United States have impunity when it comes to China. China at least needs to develop its nuclear arsenal to the point where United States need to realize how dangerous and how unproductive this arms race is. I mean, I agree with you. U.S. politicians have this crazy mentality, but it's only way to get their attention is to match United States on its own terms in terms of the destruction capability. And I think China is doing that. I mean, as we speak, China has increased its nuclear arsenal. I think it will continue to increase its nuclear arsenal until, I mean, it doesn't have to reach parity with United States. It just has enough capability to glass United States from sea to shining sea. 1,000 nuclear warheads should be able to do that. I mean, there's a saying, it doesn't matter how many times United States can destroy China. China can only have to destroy United States once. That's enough. 1,000 nuclear warheads, 1,500 nuclear warheads. That should be enough.
Scott, I haven't been watching. Normally, I watch a few of your shows over the last week or two, but I haven't been able to because I've been quite busy. But is today's the first show that you've really kind of unloaded? Because normally you're quite reasonable about this, but you seem to be very pretty passionate here in the last this program for sure. So it's the first time I've seen this.
You're using the term reasonableness with thermonuclear warfare. I just want to correct you on this. Is this what you're saying?
No, I mean, no.
So when we're talking about thermonuclear warfare, I'm supposed to be reasonable.
No, that's not my point. My point is, I've watched you on the programs a few times, and the way you explain it to people, we haven't talked really nuclear on this program, I don't think, in the last month. But in the last few weeks, has something changed that you felt that maybe we're not picking up on?
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
What's changing is I'm seeing a whole world out there getting cocky.
Okay.
Look, I've been criticizing my government for a long, long time now, and my government deserves to be criticized. I criticize the American people, and they deserve to be criticized. I criticize American policy. It deserves to be criticized.
Okay.
Constructive criticism is always a good thing. But I've also been warning people about America's nuclear arsenal and America's nuclear doctrine and America's nuclear policy and the real risk of nuclear war. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people becoming very nonchalant in their discussion of America. I see it in your comments. America's finished. We're not finished, guys. We're here. Okay. We're not finished. Ask Chinese diplomats if they think we're finished. Ask Russian diplomats if they think we're finished. Ask any diplomat in the world if they think we're finished. Ask the Iranians if they think we're finished. We may be on a global trend when you pull it out long enough on the decline, but we're still way the hell up there on the bar chart. Okay. Our decline, we haven't reached the end of the Roman Empire yet. We're still up here at the apex of our power, maybe moving down, but we're still very powerful. And this is the point I'm trying to make today is stop treating America like it's a child. Stop treating America like it doesn't have the ability to take the whole world down with it. Because not only do we have the ability, but increasingly we have the mindset. And this is what I'm trying to educate people on. We are freaking crazy. Did you hear Lindsey Graham?
Oh,
Now,
yeah, I heard him.
normally, if an
Mhm.
American senator says insanity in the U.S. Congress like that, there would be people standing up going, "How dare you? How dare?" Everybody else is sitting there going, "Yeah, that's us." Yeah.
But Scott, that has been the state of United States for, I don't know, as long as I've been alive.
But it
And
has not, Carl. It just hasn't been the state of the United States. There has been sanity in the United States Congress. I know because I know many of the senators who fought for nuclear arms control, who believed in nuclear arms control. They don't exist anymore, Carl. They're all gone. They're finished. They've been squeezed out. We now have nothing but a bunch of chauvinistic America first senators and congressmen who have lost the ability to reason with the rest. Look at Russophobia. The reason why I fight so hard against Russophobia is that it has blinded us to the reality of Russia. And if you're not dealing with the reality of Russia, you think you can come up with policies to deal with Russia that are going to fail. It's the same thing with China. I'm not as well informed on China as I am on Russia, but I'm informed enough to tell you right now, in America, we don't respect you. We don't respect you at all because we're ignorant about you. And you can sit there and say, that's America's problem, but it's not America's problem. It's your problem. It's the world's problem. This is why we need to embark on a counter xenophobia program every bit as robust as the one we're trying to get against the Russians, because I think that the best way to deal with China isn't to fear China and therefore view China as an existential threat, but to learn about China so that we can be rational in our policies, so we can have senators, when Graham talks about using nuclear weapons, stand up and say, "How dare you? No, that is not America. That's not how we operate." But nobody did that, Carl, and that should scare the living dog poop out of you. The fact that not a single American senator stood up and challenged Lindsey Graham in what he said. Not only that, where's the challenge in the American media? Because the American media, to a large extent, dictates the American people's mindset. And right now, the American people are being told that's normal. That's the way it should be. We should be proud that we dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's a time when that would probably get people to put their head down in shame and say, "Nah, that wasn't a good look. We shouldn't have done that." Now it's the total revisionist history. We're like, yeah, not only that, we're blaming it on the Russians. I mean, you saw what's going on when in the most recent meeting that was in Hiroshima. Even the Japanese aren't blaming America for that anymore. Even the Japanese are like, yeah, but it's sort of like the Russians' fault. Well, wait a minute, we're the ones that dropped the bomb on you. Yeah, but we're not going to say. The Japanese never once said, they talked about the bomb being dropped, but they never once said who did it. They didn't point to Tony Blinken and go, "That was you. That was you who did it." Instead, they're reinventing a mindset that postures Russia and China as the threat.
Carl,
that's not going to change. I mean, that's only going to get worse. As United States decline, the craziness is only going to increase, Scott. Or increase the craziness both in the media and in the political establishment. I mean, there's a mental dysfunctional here. It's getting more and more dysfunctional. I agree with everything you said. You know, United States crazy. U.S. still possess awesome destructive power, but none of that is going away. That has been the case. It's going. You know, I agree. It's going. United States is going to crazier, but I don't think tomorrow you will magically be transformed. Suddenly the American mentality will be transformed about Russia or China. But I do think, you know, with Russia and China continue to rise, you know, sometimes the hard power speaks more than the soft power. United States understand that. United States certainly understand how hard power works. People, you know, even like the case of Japan, even though they got nuked, right now they still scrape and bow at the United States as a great savior. So at the end of the day, you know, it's still about hard power. It's still about nuclear arsenals.
Okay, let me ask a question. Scott, ultimately in the end here, if we went to a nuclear showdown, that would be the president's call? Or would he take who makes that call? Is it the president in the end?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that much of the call has been taken out of the president's hands. This is what I'm trying to
Okay.
explain to Carl.
Okay.
You see, it's not about the president waking up one day and going, do I want to call their bluff or not? It's about operational plans that are in existence. And when things happen in response. And there's a lot of front loading of tactical nuclear weapons release authority to theater commanders if certain conditions are met. And this is the danger, that things can happen where politicians, because if politicians are posturing and then things happen at the forward level, what does China do when what's I can't remember, you got the big island in the south that begins with an H, Hainan.
Hainan.
Yeah, but right across from the Chinese mainland is a major port, shipping port, and in a big.
Or is that Sanya? What would that be?
No, Zhejiang. I think they're talking about using tactical nuclear weapon on Zhejiang for a while in the U.S. Pentagon. Yeah, they talk about because Zhejiang is a naval port.
But again, but Carl, we don't talk about it. We plan for it. We train for it. We have weapons designated for that purpose that are forward deployed, and they have trigger mechanisms that are on full automatic. This is what I'm trying to tell you. You're believing that this is going to come down to rationality. What I'm trying to say is we have to control the interaction, because it's not about calling bluff. It's about things being front loaded on full automatic. The president of the United States, yes, when it comes to the strategic and all this kind of stuff, he's the one that has to meet, though, with the National Command Authority. That's why communications is so important. This is why we told the Russians, don't cyber attack our ability to do strategic comms, because the moment the president can't coordinate with the people, then we have to assume a worst case scenario and launch. This is the reality of it. So the president will, of course, consult with people. If it comes to a preemptive strike, there are people that can put the brakes on the president through constitutional means. General Miley hinted at that when he talked about Donald Trump. And he said that I don't blindly obey the order to launch nuclear weapons. I have to come back and say, what is the proportionality here? What is the justification here under international law? What are we speaking of? This is, and so there's that, but I'm just trying to say at the front level, if China, let's say we had something happen where China sunk an American carrier battle group, what do you think the outcome would be, Carl?
Let me unmute myself. I mean, they have been talking about using tactical nukes in U.S. Navy for a long time. They have been talking about.
When was the last time? But when was the last time you sunk a U.S. aircraft carrier, Carl?
China has not sunk.
Right. But what happens when you do? Because you're planning on it. You're planning that if we try to confront you in the South China Sea, that you're going to sink a carrier battle group. You guys plan for it. You have to plan for it. You're a military that does it. What do you think will happen the moment you sink an American aircraft carrier?
United States may use tactical nuclear weapons, and then there will be a nuclear war. Civilization is over. Let's do it.
Carl,
let's do it. Let's go.
You guys, I'm going to tell you guys something. My average chat feed on live streams is about 1,400 comments. I'm at 6,000. What the hell are you guys doing to this today? There's 6,000 exchanged messages. So clearly.
My point is, Carl, is that I don't want us to lose a carrier, because I know what the outcome will be. So I'm trying to promote policies designed to deconflict the United States and China, to keep us away from that decision point. I'm trying to make the point that we don't bluff, that we have plans that are on full automatic, and that if we get in a situation where we are deploying a carrier battle group with ill intent towards China, China will have no choice but to respond appropriately and attack that carrier battle group. China has the weapons that can sink an American carrier. We know that. But when that happens, it's all over. There's no calling a bluff at that point in time. We will automatically nuke you. Automatically. It is built into the system. Automatic control, tactical release of nuclear weapons has been pushed down so that when you sink a carrier, we take out the threat, because carriers are what we do. Now, we don't like to talk about it. I can't say that I know this for absolute certainty today because I'm not privy to American nuclear war plans, but I'm telling you right now that I know enough to tell you that you sink an American carrier, you're going to lose a Chinese city. And when you lose a Chinese city, you're going to move to make America lose American cities. And then, as you said, it's all over. You may be gleeful about that outcome, Carl. I'm not. I want to avoid that outcome at all possibility, which is why when I hear rhetoric that talks about belittling America to the point where we may feel we need to send a carrier battle group in to prove our manhood, I don't want that. That's why I say people need to control the rhetoric. People need not that the American government
Scott,
listens to anything we say.
Nobody want a nuclear Armageddon, Scott. I mean, right now I think none of us here, I think even including the comments, want a nuclear exchange. But I think United States also need to understand, that's what the mad doctrine is still in play here: mutually assured destruction. If you use nukes, other will use nukes back. And right now, there's, like you said, U.S. believe he can get away with it because they believe the Chinese nuclear arsenal is not high enough. Is not enough to wipe out U.S. from sea to shining seas. That will change when China possesses 1,000 nuclear warheads. I mean, I think we are going toward that direction right now. Whether that means we will go towards the outcome of nuclear war, I'm not so sure about that, because I still believe people's sense of self-preservation, include even U.S. politician like Lindsey Graham. I mean, he may talk a big game, and he is crazy, but I believe these people love money more than anything else than to risk a nuclear Armageddon.
Okay,
well, let me just push back briefly on that, Carl. Okay, so you acknowledge right now that China doesn't have a sufficient secondary strike capability, that America can take out the 200 to 400 nuclear weapons that China today possesses.
I don't know. Only if U.S. launch a massive first strike. But as well as I do, Scott, the moment the detection, the launch has been, the moment China has detected launch from U.S. or U.S. subs, China is going to launch its own to get its birds in the air before.
But Carl, you know that I can take a Ohio-class submarine close enough to the Chinese shore and do a deflected launch that you'll never detect until the missiles blow up on your bases, right? You know that.
Well, when it happens, first of all, there's assumption that United States knows all the missile sites in China, right? That U.S. has to account for all the Chinese nuclear submarines and all the Chinese ICBM sites in China. And has all the contingency plan to take everything out, right? I don't think U.S. have that. I mean, I don't think U.S. knows where all 400 nuclear warheads of China located.
Maybe we don't. I don't want to push that point because it's irrelevant. But what the point I will push is this: the danger here in China building up its nuclear arsenal, and I believe from a negotiation standpoint, it's very difficult to talk about a negotiated reduction in nuclear arsenals until China gets up to the point where America's not making the unilateral cuts. But a precipitous growth in China's nuclear arsenal at a time when the United States is still uncertain about what its strategic outcome that it desires with Taiwan, when we have Americans talking about the real possibility and indeed desirability of a war with China over Taiwan in 2026, 2027. If I'm a nuclear war planner and I'm advising the President of the United States, and I've lost all moral compass because I've been advising no nuclear weapons, but I would sit there and say, Mr. President, right now, if we launch a preemptive strike against China's nuclear arsenal, we have a 90% chance of having a zero secondary retaliation capability, and what they have remaining, we believe, will be older systems that our missile defense system will be able to take out most. They may get one or two through, but it'll be the end of China. So right now we have the strategic advantage now's the time to make a move on Taiwan. If we wait until China gets their nuclear arsenal up, then Taiwan's off the map, and now we have to rethink our entire Pacific dominance strategy. And you know, that's the conversation that will take place and has taken place by the nuclear planners. There's a reason why Joe Biden ran on a policy of going back to the original intent of nuclear weapons deterrence. And he said, when I become president, I will ensure that our nuclear posture is taken back to deterrence only, that the only reason why our weapons exist for deterrence. He never did that. And the reason why is that the war planners came in and told him, you can't, that we must maintain an active, viable first strike capability. And they laid out a number of scenarios. And one of the scenarios is if we are compelled, that's based on American concepts of compelled, to confront China over Taiwan, we want to be able to do so with the ability to win a strategic nuclear exchange with China. That's the kind of talk that's taking place, Carl. That's why I'm scared to death. And that's why I'm pushing back very, very strongly here, because I want to avoid any situation where some idiot says, Mr. President, now's the best time. Now's the best time to launch the preemptive nuclear strike, because if we wait another day, we're going to lose the advantages that we've accrued today. Those conversations take place, and we know they take place because we didn't change our nuclear posture as it was promised to do.
But Scott, what would trigger a conflict that bring to the point where a U.S. carrier would be sunk, right? I mean, what would trigger that event? A lot had to happen in order to lead to that outcome.
A mistake?
What about the I don't know what's going on at the South Thomas Shoal right now? Scarborough Shoal.
Yes, a Scarborough Shoal. China will probably fill it, create an artificial island, create an.
And what if the Philippines, now backed up by an American arsenal that we're deploying right now, not a game-changing arsenal, but an arsenal that we're deploying?
It's a United States. U.S. Navy is going to deploy its aircraft carrier to secure a reef. A reef? I mean, like, we're not even talking about islands here. We're talking about reefs that get submerged under high tide. So that the United States is going to trigger World War III over a bunch of rocks that gets submerged underwater in the high tide. I mean, I don't believe that.
Well, what happens if the Philippines have their Marines on that grounded ship and they're trying to resupply it, and China's saying you're not going to resupply it, and America tells the Filipinos resupply it, we're backing you up with some attack helicopters. And now we come in with our attack helicopters, and the Chinese say you ain't flying attack helicopters over this, and we shoot down 2 attack helicopters. We now come in with some land-based aircraft. You deploy your own aircraft. Now we're deploying the carrier, Carl. Do you understand how escalation works? That's how it works.
The cat and mouse game between the Filipino supply ships and Chinese Coast Guard has been ongoing since 1999, when Philippines ran aground Sierra Madre on Second Thomas Shaw. That tension flares up now and then, depending on the geopolitical situation. Right now, we're talking about water cannon fights between Chinese Coast Guard and the Filipino Navy supply ships. So is United States Navy going to bring a gun to a water cannon fight? Okay. I mean, this is a question I'm asking here. Is United States Navy going to send in its aircraft carrier against Chinese Coast Guard ships? That's
was Russia. The question I guess you have to ask, therefore, is was Russian mobilization and French mobilization and German mobilization guaranteed when Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo?
There was no nuclear weapons back then. There was
You're missing the whole point.
There's no threat.
You're missing the point of escalation.
I know what you're saying. But at that time, much of Europe, Germany already had the plan to conquer Europe. I mean, everybody was ready to go. But at that point, there was no deterrent. There's no nuclear deterrent to prevent big powers from actually going to. So
you know what the 3rd Marine Division's been doing over the course of the last 4 years, right, Carl? You're aware of that.
Well, I don't think they will be deployed on the second time.
They're already deployed. Carl,
Second
they're
Thomas
there.
Shaw.
They're
on
in the
Philippines.
Philippines.
They're in the Philippines, but second Thomas Shaw, if they're in the Filipino bases, okay,
I'm
so they're
stepping
in the
out of this.
Filipino bases.
I'm
But
stepping out of this.
We're talking about a bunch of rocks that get submerged under high tide here. What the hell is U.S. Marines gonna do on a bunch of rocks submerged under high tide? They can shack up with the Filipino Marines who are posted on the Sierra Madre, which is a World War II U.S. warship. Right, that's literally falling apart under weather conditions. I mean, what are they gonna do? They're gonna build a fortress. I think China has the capability to do that, to build an artificial island in South China Sea. Does United States or even the Philippines or United States have capability to do that? I don't know.
We have the capability to sink Chinese ships. So when we tell the Filipinos to move in and forcefully resupply the Santa Marina, and the Chinese come in with water cannons, and the Filipinos come in with something stronger than water cannons, the Chinese escalate. The U.S. Marines have a doctrine right now to sink your ships.
Well, I mean, I have yet to see it escalate further than the water cannon fight. When we will get there when we get there, but I still find highly likely the World War III will start over a bunch of rocks that get submerged underwater.
That's the only way World War III starts, Carl. That's the only way World War III starts, because World War III is so insane that it doesn't start with the big power stuff. It starts with the shoal that hasn't been fully developed, because nobody believes that World War III will start there. And then it escalates, then it escalates, and then it escalates. And now it's suddenly not about that, but neither side's going to back down, because to back down now, it's become too many stakes on the table. So they escalate again. That's how World War III starts, Carl, with a bunch of stupid rocks barely sticking over the water.
This is not about, we're not talking about accident here. We're talking about full planning, because Chinese and the Filipino side since 2014 had a gentleman agreement where China allowed the Filipino supply ship to supply the Marines on Sierra Madre, provided they don't bring building material to reinforce Sierra Madre and to build up the island fortification there. What changed recently is with the election of Bongbong Marcos. Bongbong Marcos reversed the policy. Now they're trying to build building material to Sierra Madre, and that's why you have Chinese Coast Guard ships spraying water cannons on the Filipino.
That's why you have the United States.
Situation. This is because United States
arrangement.
Exactly, but this is in the plan, because this allowed United States to come back to Philippines in force with rights to the Filipino military bases, right? But that's the main goal. The main goal is to deploy United States military assets in the Philippines, since it left after the Cold War. But the goal is not to start World War III over a bunch of rocks. The goal is to deploy, to forward deploy United States military presence in the Philippines. So I think there are two different things. I mean, one is plan, very careful planning to get U.S. military hardware on the Philippines, using the second Thomas Shaw as an excuse. And the second, we're talking about an accident blowing up because of this planning. I don't think United States do not need to send its naval asset into the second Thomas Shaw to be able to deploy its military hardware on the Philippines. United States don't even need to be directly involved. It costs United States nothing. Right now, United States is gaining by profiting from this crisis, by placing its militaries on Filipino bases. But U.S. actually doesn't gain anything by directly getting involved in the second Thomas Shaw confrontation. This is my argument. I mean, both sides are playing a very rational game here so far. I don't see this blowing up into a World War III situation. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to send in Marines to a bunch of rocks that submerge under high tide.
But it's not about a bunch of rocks submerged under high tide, is it, Carl? It's about China's taking a very aggressive posture in the, I forget what they call it, the
dispute has been ongoing for over 50 years.
I know, Carl. I've been following the dispute.
Yes,
and I do remember that just recently a Chinese ship and a U.S. naval ship collided.
It's the second Thomas Shaw.
So we have put our ships in that region in an aggressive manner, and there has been a collision. I also know that we've flown aircraft over the area that have been intercepted by the Chinese, warning them out. What happens to the point where we say we're going to take it to the next level? See, we don't just simply deploy Marines into the Philippines. When we deploy the Marines in the Philippines, there is a plan on how to reinforce them rapidly in case of an escalation. We never simply deploy something forward without a plan to follow through. So this is where I disagree with you. The danger is that we are locked and cocked and ready to rock on about a stupid shoal. I agree. Is that shoal worth the end of the world? Nope. But it's not about that shoal. It's about America's, posture in the Pacific versus China's posture in the Pacific. It's not just about a military posture, but how it links to an economic posture. That much of the ASEAN nations right now feel that America isn't serious about engaging against China in the region. Therefore, they're going to hedge their bets by bettering relations with China. The United States is trying to come in and say, no, we're here to stay. We're serious. And we've picked this stupid shoal to be the point where we're saying, trust us, we're serious. This isn't about a shoal, Carl. This is about American prestige.
Right. I mean, how is American prestige being served by actually getting directly involved in? Right now, U.S. is already profiting from the crisis. It's deploying Marines, like you talk about. It's being able to access to all the Filipino facility. And this is to use Philippines as a dating ground in a potential conflict over Taiwan. This is not really about Second Thomas Shaw, right? Second Thomas Shaw is irrelevant to the United States. That's always just an excuse to get the U.S. military in there, in the U.S. boots on the ground. But I mean, this, as long as the Second Thomas Shaw right now is between Chinese Coast Guard, Filipino supply ships, what's the problem? Nothing has fundamentally changed since 1999, since the Filipino ran a ground Sierra Madre on the Second Thomas Shaw.
But you yourself admitted something fundamentally changed. You admitted that whether it's 2014, 2016, I think right now that the Chinese have said it was a 2016 gentleman's agreement between Duarte and Xi Jinping made in Beijing during the visit of the Filipino president to China, where fishing rights, the Filipinos could fish on the island, but they had to hold their military ships off to 20 nautical miles. Marcos just said that may have existed, but it doesn't exist today. We've unilaterally done it. We also know that the Filipinos were trying to work with the Chinese to come out with a solution. An admiral had a conversation with a Chinese embassy official. That's been leaked to show that the admiral was trying to be reasonable. Somehow, for whatever reason, the conversation was leaked, and now that admiral's under attack. Marcos is in a sling. America's doubling down. This thing's not just about everything you said. This is about America putting its prestige marker on the Philippines and telling the Filipinos, you can't back down on this one. We got your back, but you've got to be more decisive on this one. So now the question is Marcos just going to limit it to water cannons? Okay, I'd like to hope that he would.
Let me reframe the question, right? United States has also put its prestige marker on Ukraine. How is the Ukraine war going? Is that going to lead to a nuclear war? I don't see it happening. I mean, United States is now willing to get directly involved in the Ukraine conflict, other than supplying money and weapons and some advisors training. They NATO countries are now willing to engage Russia directly because that will lead to World War III, right? I mean, this is
Ukraine's not over yet, Carl. Ukraine's not over yet.
No, I agree. Ukraine's not over. But
6 months ago, did we have Macron talk about sending French troops into Ukraine? Did we? No. Why? Because the situation's deteriorating. Ukraine's not over yet, and it needs to be managed very carefully. And thank God we have Vladimir Putin in charge in Russia, who will manage this very carefully because he wants to avoid escalation. And this is my only advice to the Chinese.
So why would you think the Chinese would not manage this, will manage to blow up World War III, whereas Russia, still haven't managed to trigger World War III?
Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
Because you told me it was just about a shoal. And if that's the Chinese mindset, then we're screwed. We're going to war. China needs to understand it's about nuclear war.
first of all, I'm not the spokesperson for the Chinese
I
government.
know.
Despite what many people in the comments might think, I have no official ties in with the Chinese government. I have no idea how Xi Jinping's mind works, right? I don't speak for the Chinese government. From my observation point, right, this is not going to be leading to World War III. I'm just going to put it out here. And I use the conflict in Ukraine is much more serious than whatever the water cannon fight is going on in the second Thomas Shaw, right? I mean,
but Carl, but
Go ahead.
you yourself said that this, you made the point, and it's a valid point, that this is more about Taiwan than about the, freedom of navigations. Taiwan is a very serious issue, Carl. It's one of the most serious issues out there.
Exactly.
So,
let's say China is not. Let's say China does not make the first move on Taiwan. Then what? Then what? I mean, Russia actually made the move in Ukraine. That didn't trigger World War III. China is actually not making a military move on Taiwan. Like, look, the Taiwan operation, this is going to be one of the biggest amphibious operation in the world. It's going to be way more than Normandy. I mean, like the level of preparation for a Taiwan ground invasion, you will be able to observe this via satellite 6 months prior to any operation of that kind. You will see troops mobilizing along the coast, all the logistics centers getting built up, right? None of that is happening right now, right? I mean, so if China did not make a first move on Taiwan, then what? If China do not give the United States,
if China doesn't make a first move on Taiwan, then we make the first move. 6 months ago, did we have U.S. special forces on an island 5 nautical miles off the coast of mainland China? The answer is no. We do today. 6 months ago, did we have 300 permanently stationed special forces in Taiwan as
bunch of Green Berets are in Kinmen Island probably doing like gathering intelligence, right? But other than that, what can they do? I mean,
they're a tripwire, Carl. They're a tripwire.
Yes, if Chinese forces do not move on Kinmen Island, the tripwire is just going to be stuck there.
Okay, but you missed the whole point. Let me teach you about the camel in the tent. Okay, you have a tent. You don't want the camel in the tent. Taiwan is your tent. You don't want America in the tent. You just let the nose under the tent. You know what happens next? The head comes in. And after that, the shoulders. Next thing you know, the whole damn camel's in the You let American troops on an island off the coast.
The camel is already has been in the tent.
I don't
Taiwan,
think so.
United States posted nuclear tip Nike missiles on Taiwan during the Cold War. They only pulled out after Nixon visit China, after the both sides work out agreement. Then U.S. pulled out its military from Taiwan. During the Vietnam War, 60,000 U.S. troops rotated out of Taiwan. Taiwan is one of the major R&R places for the GIs who fought in the Vietnam War. And Pentagon actually had a plan to nuke mainland China in 1958 in the second Taiwan Strait crisis. Well, again, that did not happen, right? So, I mean, we've been through all this before, Scott. We have, the Cold War wasn't that long ago.
But why didn't it happen, Carl? Why didn't it happen? Because Nixon went to China.
Well, not in 1958. Nixon went to China in 1970s. The United States did not use a nuclear weapon in 1958, according to their plan, because at that time they were afraid of Soviet retaliation. Again, nuclear deterrent. They did put nukes on Taiwan, though. They had Nike missiles all lining up, pointing at target on mainland China. And why did Nixon go to China? Well, because at the end of the day, they wanted China's help against Soviet Union. So that happened.
But what was the precursor of it? What did Nixon have to agree to? The one China policy?
Yes.
All right. What did the one China policy say? It talked about America recognizing that Taiwan and China are one nation and that America wouldn't do certain things like deploy American troops. That's why we got our troops out of Taiwan, I believe. That's one of the reasons why we did. Why are our troops going back into Taiwan if we respect that one China policy anymore, Carl? I'm trying to tell you that the camel left the tent. Now the camel's trying to get back into the tent.
Well, this all happened. What I'm trying to say, this all happened before. That did not lead to World War III or nuclear exchange. We are returning back to Cold War 2.0 right now. Scott. I mean, we are what we're seeing is a replay of the history. I mean, it's very unfortunate. I mean, I don't think there needs to be a Cold War between the United States and China, but it's a very unfortunate fact is that we are. But I think we saw how it played out the first time, and I have reasonable expectations that things will not turn hot just like the first time. This is just my take, because to believe anything else, well, nuclear Armageddon, end of the human civilization. So I almost have to be optimistic, right?
But Carl, I respect your position on this, but you're the problem, not the solution. And I'll tell you why. Because you don't fear nuclear Armageddon. And when you don't fear nuclear Armageddon, you become complacent about nuclear weapons. And my job is to make sure that nobody's ever complacent about nuclear weapons, that everybody fears nuclear weapons, and everybody dreads the potential of nuclear Armageddon, and that we need to do everything humanly possible to avoid any situation that could allow itself to serve as the initiator of a cycle of escalation that leads to nuclear conflict. That's my job.
I don't speak for the Chinese government, but I think I understand the Chinese mentality. Chinese people are not afraid of nuclear weapons. They're not afraid of nuclear war, because Chinese people do not want war, but they're not scared of war. If the war comes, they will fight it. That. I mean, if it comes to down to nuclear Armageddon, so be it. So be it.
Well, then, I mean, if that's true, the Chinese policy, then we know what the outcome is going to be. It's going to be thermonuclear exchange, and then we have to, you and I will be dead, and we have to hope that China has a resilience plan that allows for continuity of civilization. I know America thinks it has a plan. I don't believe that plan will succeed, but I personally believe that you're wrong, Carl. I personally believe that the Chinese government is scared to death of nuclear war, just like any rational government is scared to death. That the Chinese have put too much time and effort into building this system that they have in place today, a system that's designed to create economic opportunities for decades to come. If China didn't fear nuclear war, why did they go through the problem of 3 successive plans of bringing 300 million people out of poverty into the middle class? You don't build a middle class just to annihilate it in thermonuclear conflict. I think China is building for a future that talks about economic prosperity, with a society that is well functioning, that has services.
Well, I will put it in historical context. Many Chinese have historical memories of what happened to World War II, when they remember the Chinese cities have been devastated and the Chinese people massacred. And you within the West, there's a slogan, never again. I mean, the same will resonate in China. If somebody is going to tell the Chinese people they're going to suffer another century of humiliation with foreign troops on its soil, destroying Chinese cities, they will say, okay, let's end it. Let's end it now. Nuclear Armageddon. End it. Let's end it. So this United States need to understand. So, Scott, you're trying to make me understand how Americans think, how the U.S. politicians think. You Americans need to understand. Chinese people are not afraid to end it all. When the chips are done, the Chinese people are not afraid to they will rather end the world than having to go through another century of humiliation. That's the fact.
I'm not doubting that, but Carl, did I say that I don't want to go to China and learn what the Chinese people think? One of the problems with Sinophobia is that we aren't thinking rationally about China, that we have an irrational fear of China that's born of the ignorance that we have about the reality of China. And so I've been saying from day one that I need to get to China. Americans need to get to China so we can hear this. We can have this conversation with the Chinese people and the Chinese government, so that the Chinese viewpoint is fully understood in America, so that we make decisions about how to solve the American-Chinese problem based upon a real definition of the problem. So I'm not shying away from that, but I'm saying right now that you may be right in everything you just said, but if that doesn't register in the United States, it doesn't matter that you're right.
I fully agree, but the fact is, people, it doesn't matter if I'm right, or you're right, Scott. In a nuclear war, nobody's gonna win.
Right,
We're all gonna be gone.
But that's why I think I'm right to try to avoid a nuclear war. not to be nonchalant about its possibility under the assumption that it's just a bluff, that it's a paper tiger, that's this. I happen to believe that nuclear weapons are real, that we have a plan to use them. We're prepared to use them. And some of these plans are on full automatic. And if we allow minor little things like the South Thomas Shoal to expand into something that's no longer minor, that we could begin the process of an escalation that leads to the triggering of automatic nuclear war. And I want to avoid that at all costs.
I mean, I think we can all agree we all want to avoid a nuclear Armageddon. I just don't think we're quite at that point yet. I mean, I agree with you on many things, Scott, and I have great respect for you. I'm just saying, Second Thomas Shaw is not at the same level of conflict as the Ukraine conflict is. I mean, even at an existential level, particularly for United States.
The Ukraine conflict began as Maidan, which turned into Odessa, which turned into Mariupol, which turned into Donbass. All of that was part of the cycle of escalation that turned into Minsk, that turned into the Ukraine conflict. And I disagree. I believe that the South Thomas Shoal is exactly the kind of incident that leads to escalation, because when it happens, nobody takes it seriously. Nobody says this could lead to an escalation of the crisis. That's why I want to treat that. I treat every potential point of conflict with China as being the potential trigger point of something greater. And that's why I seek to de-escalate at the lowest possible level.
How do you de-escalate if one of the party wants to escalate, Scott?
Well, first of all, does China need to build something at South Thomas Shoal?
China is not building anything in Second Thomas Shoal. Second Thomas Shoal right now is being occupied by the Filipino World War II era warship Sierra Madre.
But according to the Filipinos, they've published photographs that show that somebody's gone around, did some dredging or dumped some.
They're talking about Scarborough Shoal, which is a different shoal up north from the Spratly Islands. It's a tit tat for tat. If Philippines gonna bring an issue at Second Thomas Shoal, then China is gonna build an island in the Scarborough Shoal.
Would you call that escalation, Carl?
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
Now with the United States, the second you say let's escalate,
let's do it. Let's escalate. Let's escalate. No,
I opt not to escalate. I opt not to go down this path.
Right now, see, Scott, you've had to listen to what you're saying. Right now, United States is already escalating in the South China Sea. They're already escalating in the Second Thomas Shoal. You cannot expect China not to respond. And this is how escalation works. You go up the escalation chain until finally both sides say, okay, let's stop this, right? But it takes two to tango. It's not just, you can't just have one side to continually provocate and escalate and expect the others do nothing, because that will only lead to further escalation from one side. That's how it works, Scott.
Well, Carl, I know how it works. And yeah, I do expect one side or the other to say no. I expect the adult in the room to de-escalate. And on this one, I think China should be the adult in the room. There's no existential struggle for China over either South Thomas Shoal or Scarborough Islands. It's simply not. China's already projected its power. It's already built its island bases. China's in the prospect of, if I were China, and I'd say, do I want to perhaps create stability and not escalate or even de-escalate in exchange for the potential of BRICS Forum getting on its 2 feet and maturing into a G7 counterpart? I'd put my priority on BRICS as opposed to
Scott. This is all about posturing, right? China did not build on Scarborough Shoal until now for a reason, because before they had the gentleman agreement with in 2014, even before Duterte, they had a gentleman agreement with when the Philippine president was Estrada, and at that time China did not build in Scarborough Shoal, and now Philippines is making an issue out of Second Thomas Shoal by bringing building material, trying to reinforcing the World War II ship Sierra Madre is falling apart. Now China is sending a message by start building in Scarborough Shoal. So see, this is China is showing this are my options. I can choose to build up an artificial island here if I want to. Right now it's still in the process of dredging up sand, so that stop can be reversed. It just depends how the other party will respond. This is how negotiation happens, Scott. One side does something, the other side does something else, and then
Carl, I've lived this life. I've gone to war. I know what I'm talking about. Okay, I understand how negotiations work. I've participated in negotiations. I get it. I'm trying to say that when you look back in history at the cycle of escalation that leads to conflicts, most historians say it could have been resolved here. It could have been resolved there. They didn't need to escalate here. They didn't need to escalate there. And so I would like people, before we talk about what the next step will be in the Scarborough shoals or the South Thomas Shoal, to step back and say, okay, let's start at new. Instead of starting here, let's start with nuclear war. Let's start with the end of the world. Oh, we didn't want that to happen, right? We're both in agreement. We don't want that to happen. So now we start backing it down. At what point in time do we stop the nuclear war from happening? When does it become logical to stop the nuclear war from happening? And my point of view is at the smallest level of escalation, because at some point in time, it takes on a life of its own. National pride gets in, existential discussions gets in. That's what I'm arguing for, Carl, is to stop this thing early on before we take it to where it could possibly go.
It's not going to stop as long as U.S. keep on finding these points to poke China. I mean, it's poking the bear and poking the dragon. That's what United States do. China is not going to be expected to just sit back and do nothing.
China can outlast the United States economically in the Pacific. If China puts enough political pressure, first of all, China can solve the Philippine problem economically, not militarily. Don't play America's game. America can't sustain the military.
This is not just China or United States. The Filipino side also have to come to agreement, right? I mean, this did happen when China was working with Duterte's, but now the Philippines has a different president. They have different priorities, and this is a path they choose to go under. So it takes two to tango, Scott.
Carl, I understand that. I'm just saying that China, I think, would be better off putting economic pressure on Philippines as opposed to playing America's military escalation game.
I mean, I don't think China has much option there because Marcos already put on hold most of the Belt and Road project in the Philippines. So they're saying, no, like, we don't want Chinese investment. Okay, what else can you do? China can stop buying bananas and pineapple from the Philippines. Sure, China could do that, but then what? Then if Marcos decided, it's more important for him to access to his dad's frozen accounts than have Philippines to actually have a functional economy. Then what? Then you need to have all kind of options on the table, Scott.
No, you don't.
Carrot is only one thing. You also need the stick.
I'm just telling you, Carl, you don't, because the stick gets used, and then I'm just telling you, somebody who you don't need all that. That's the American line, and I'm really sad that China's now taking the American stance. See, we're the ones that always escalate the problem by saying all options are on the table, when in fact that should never be the case. Only the appropriate options should be on the table, because the second you say that all options are on the table, it becomes by definition an existential issue. And if we want to start with at the beginning by saying this isn't an existential issue, then why are all options on the table?
Why is the United States in South China Sea? Right? So we're getting to the point how we got here to the first place. Why United States is doing freedom of navigation patrol in South China Sea? Why is United States arming Taiwan?
I'm not here to debate
exactly. China cannot be expected to do nothing. They have to right now. They have to do some signal that China have options. These are the options. One of the options is maybe building artificial island on Scarborough Shoal. If the Philippines and United States keep on going at this, why would United States be concerned? that China is building an artificial island in South China Sea. What is any business of United States? South China Sea is not an existential issue for the United States.
Well, I mean,
South China Sea is in the backyard of China. China did not want United States to throw its weight around in South China Sea. I mean, the whole point is, China do not want United States to nosy around in its backyard, and it's just like how Russia do not want NATO in
make the argument that China's historical claim on the South China Sea is tenuous at best, and that
sure. But what does that have to do with the United States?
Well, because we have allies in South Korea and Japan whose strategic sea lines of communication go through
South Korea, Japan, they do not border South China Sea either.
No, but the strategic lines of communication go through the South China Sea. And therefore we have to ensure
80% of the trade through South China Sea is to and from China. So South China Sea is far more important to Chinese lifeline. This is why
did you ever hear
United States to get the fuck out of South China Sea?
Did you ever hear me say that China doesn't have a right to be in South China Sea?
No. I know.
You asked me to respond to the question of what business is of America. I just told you from the American perspective what the business is. Now, do I think it's
what I'm saying? What I'm saying is when United States is doing all these provocations for finding all these excuses to contain China in South China Sea, you can expect China not to respond. Just like you cannot expect Russia not to respond to the NATO expansion east, all the way to
I agree, Ukraine. But look what Russia did.
China will respond. Ukraine will get wrecked. And you know what? If United States keep on going this, there might be a war in Pacific too.
And I'm trying to avoid that at all costs.
Oh, we all want to avoid war, but like I say, Chinese people do not want war, but they're not afraid of war. Hey, Danny. Hey, how are you, sir?
Hey, well, guys, Danny has been sitting back watching this and said to me, this is quite the conversation between Scott and Carl. And I said, Danny, you got to come in and just enjoy this with me, because my chat box is going absolutely ballistic on the side. We got people that are totally like, Scott's totally right. And then we got people like, Carl's an arrogant vlogger. You name it, man. But you texted me about 20 minutes ago saying this is fantastic to watch these guys have a very, very constructive conversation. Thank you for joining, Danny. Scott, how much time you got? You got to head out soon? Or are you okay for a few more minutes with us?
If you let me go get a Diet Coke, I can stay.
Go get your Diet Coke. Everybody, well, Scott's going to get his Diet Coke. I just want you guys put it on your let me just hang on a sec. I'm just going to find this. If Danny, you can drop your link in the live box there, the comment box. Danny's has a live stream coming up right after my show where Scott's coming back. This is fantastic. Carl, you okay there, Carl? You good? Okay, Carl's fine. Scott's got his Diet Coke. Everybody, Danny Highpunk's got a live stream coming up right after our show. So hit that, I guess, subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to Danny's channel, and the notification so that you know exactly when his show starts. I'm passing it to Danny for a minute here, and once Danny's done letting you guys know what his live stream's about, I want to hop back into this and see where this is gonna drop. Danny, go ahead.
Sure. Well, it's great to be on with you guys. I'm actually going to be on with Scott in a couple of days, so it's really good to see you, Scott, and good to see you, Carl, and of course, Alex. Thanks for bringing me on for just a minute. Yeah, no, I'm going to be live at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on with the Durand and Glenn Deason. So Alex Christoforou, Alexander Mercouris, and Glenn Deason. Glenn Deason just wrote this really great book on Ukraine and Eurasia. And so we're going to talk about, especially in relation to what just happened to Iran's president, Raisi, the tragic death. We're going to talk about what does all this mean for Eurasia? What does this mean for the region? What does this mean for multipolarity? And we're also going to get into Ukraine and all the latest news as Russia continues to advance on the front, talk about the Putin-Xi meeting. So we'll cover the gambit. And then in a couple of days, I'll see Scott on my channel, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. So it's really good to be with all of you guys. And this was a fascinating conversation. I mean, I think that there's so much to learn on both sides of this debate, and I think it really moves the conversation forward. No one is really having these conversations. I think Scott is totally right to be very worried and to try to instill that worry, because being in the USA, I am also very, very worried about the lengths that the so-called political leadership will go based on who controls them, how far they'll go to maintain and preserve their hegemony. And then Carl, I think, has had a lot of good points about history and about the balance of forces. But at the same time, I do see the big contradiction here is that the stronger that China and Russia becomes, and the relative weakness of the United States on so many other levels, surely the desperation of the United States leadership to use one of the last things it has left, which is nuclear capabilities, does become, I think, more riskier. So it is a great conversation. So I really appreciate this debate. And yeah, it's really good to be with you guys as always.
Well, Scott and Carl, fire away. Where did we leave off?
I think we left at nuclear Armageddon.
That's where we started. We went full circle.
I think, I would like to talk about Ukraine for a moment here. And I think I'm going to tune into your show too, Danny. So I appreciate you letting the audience know about your program coming up here in about 40 minutes, 39 minutes to be exact. We've seen, I guess, is today the last day Zelensky is officially the president of Ukraine? Is it finished today? I mean,
my understanding term, he was supposed to be inaugurated either today or tomorrow. If he had an election and he won the election, then this is inauguration day, which is technically when the term that he was elected for expires. And the point is, there was no election. He's not being inaugurated. What is the legal basis of his continuation as the president of Ukraine? And it's a discussion that the Russians are bringing up. From the Russian perspective, it becomes relevant in terms of conflict termination, meaning who are they going to negotiate with? And I think the Russians are putting a marker on the table that they won't negotiate with Zelensky anymore. That's over. But for me, just to be honest, it's an internal Ukrainian issue. It's not anybody's damn business. Russia doesn't get, I mean, as much as I respect Russia and all that, they don't get to dictate internal domestic political solutions for the Ukraine. If the Ukrainians want Peter Pan to be president, that's their business, not Russia's business. So I think I think this is not this doesn't make Russia look good. Russia doesn't have a say over Ukrainian elections. They really don't. Ukraine could decide that they want to rip up the country. Russia doesn't get a vote. Russia needs to do what Russia needs to do to bring this conflict to a termination. And from a Russian perspective, that would mean bring it to a termination along the lines that favor Russia. But to sit there and start playing games about lines of succession, the constitutionality. The constitutional business of Ukraine is the business of Ukraine, not of Russia or anybody else. Now, Russia can say that they choose not to negotiate with this guy. That's a condition Russia can set. If Ukraine comes back and says, we don't care, now Russia's gone into, conflict extension in a way that weakens its position. Russia's always been a rule of law, player here. And part of the concept of rule of law is you don't interfere in the domestic political affairs of other nations. And this one is, I think Russia's overstepping. I think Russia shouldn't be involved in talking about the line of succession of a Ukrainian president. It's none of Russia's business.
But can we form a connection here with Ukraine's, conscription? Can we see that, both these dates, there was a big change in the law here. I'm reading an article here from Time saying Ukraine's controversial new plan to enlist more soldiers. I mean, this came into effect just 2 days ago. did he do this intentionally in case, someone said, all right, you don't really have power. And that's, someone like the Russians saying, we don't really need to negotiate with you anymore because technically you're a de facto president. I know, Scott, that you say it's none of Russia's business, but at the end of the day, they would say the same way about Putin. If, he was, not able to hold elections and he still held power, they would say, well, I don't know, technically you're not in power. So is there a connection here with, them changing this new law? This law just changed last Thursday. And I don't know if you guys have read this, but it's pretty heavy duty.
That law's been drafted for some time now. It didn't just happen overnight. It's been
right.
proposed, and it's drawn not by Ukraine's constitutional crisis over the presidency, but the manpower crisis. Ukraine has no men. They've got the
no. I know, I know. But did you guys ever see? Did you read the details of this? This is brutal. I mean, they are going right. Cutting all consular service off to all Ukrainians, pretty much in Europe. If you try to go get a visa extension, bank account, or anything like that, you can't. The service is cut off if you're, of the age of 25 and up as a man. I mean, even truck drivers have done a protest on the borders there, saying, we've had enough of this. I mean, is this enforceable? Does this will they go to the extent to try to actually cherry pick people back from European Union countries back to the Ukraine one by one? Are they that serious that this is going to happen like this?
Well, to answer that question, though, let's go to the issue of Turkey's challenge to Sweden to join NATO. And one of the things Turkey said is that you have to give us these prisoners. You have to give us these refugees. You have these Kurds. These guys who support. I can't remember the guy's name. But the little religious group, Gulenists or something of that nature, people involved in the July 16 coup effort a couple of years ago. You have to bring them to us. And the Swedes and all of Europe went, well, we can't do that because human rights. We can't turn over to you people that are going to be called upon to do things like die and be held accountable. And I think, it'll be interesting to see how the Ukrainians are impacted by this challenge this legally in Europe, because they have a sound human rights case to say no, and now they can bring up constitutionality. It's like anything in court. If you're going to hide behind a shield, you can't use it as a sword. But now Zelensky has passed a law. Is he the president of Ukraine anymore? Is that law enforceable? What is the legal status of that? What is the constitutionality of the law? These are all things now that give it the ability for a Ukrainian to go to the human rights courts in Europe and say, this is illegal. You can't pass a law that forcefully requires us to go back to Ukraine, knowing that the outcome will be to be mobilized in an unconstitutional action to go to a war that we don't agree in. We feel that this war is, if we fought this war with something we agreed in, we'd be there fighting already. The reason why we're here is we don't want to fight in this war. And then to see what Europe does, because Europe is supposed to be this wonderful place about law and human rights. Are the Europeans going to go, oh, you're right, we'll use the court system now the way it was supposed to be used to string this thing out? Because what should happen is courts put a stay on this order, make it unenforceable, and all these people in Europe never go back. But now you have nations saying, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to enforce it. And what happens when somebody challenges it in court? Is the nation going to say, well, no, we're going to override that, we're going to move forward? This creates some interesting problems. The bottom line is, though, it's not going to solve Ukraine's manpower issues, because even if these people come in, you don't go to, if you go to war with unmotivated soldiers, you tend to lose. And I can't think of anything that would make you more unmotivated than be pulled out unwillingly, evicted from what you thought was your European safe haven, compelled to go back to Ukraine to serve in an army you don't want to serve in, to fight in a war you don't want to fight, with training that's insufficient to the task, with leadership that is corrupt, against an enemy that's got its act together. So at the end of the day, this is going to have zero impact on the battlefield. It's an interesting political discussion about European law and human rights and all this stuff, but this mobilization law is not going to generate the kind of manpower necessary to cause Ukraine to solve its manpower problem. And its manpower problem is grave. It needs solving today, and it's not being solved today.
They said the app actually there was about 300,000 that allegedly signed up for this. I mean, Danny, did you hear those numbers as well? Was it about 300,000? They claim.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, what I'm interested in actually was an earlier comment made by Scott about interfering in Ukraine's political process. So I'm actually interested in hearing what Scott has to say about the aims of the special military operation and demilitarization and denazification and almost this like necessity for Ukraine's government to change in character. How do you see that, given what we've just been talking about, but also how do you see that occurring outside of quote unquote political interference? Because I don't think Russia has any aims for like literal regime change, but its special military operation certainly has a goal of changing Ukraine's policy to a degree. So I'm curious, Scott.
If you're going to cite Article 51 of the United Nations Charter and use a sort of a corollary of it, the collective self-defense, which is what Russia did by joining into a collective self-defense arrangement with Donetsk and Lugansk, which at that time were newly declared independent republics that Russia recognized, you can only justify it by citing an imminent threat. And the imminent threat was posed by a Ukrainian military that was radicalized by Ukrainian nationalists who the Russians say illegally seized control in 2014. And therefore, to be seen as self-defense, you have to remove the imminent threat, the imminent nature of the threat. And therefore, the way you remove the imminent nature of the threat, having blended a military capability with political motivation, you come up with demilitarization, denazification. It's inherently, it makes sense from a logical standpoint that the threat that's posed to the collective security arrangement, namely the Donbass, Lugansk, and Russia, is in the form of a military threat, the Ukrainian army, which needs to be demilitarized, and a political threat, this Banderist ultranationalism that needs to be denazified. And that's how the Russians would explain it. Now, I'm sure there's many lawyers out there that'll, argue to the different, but you asked the question about how does Russia square that? And I just told you how I think Russia squares that.
Danny, I want to add to this. To be honest with you, I think Zelensky is fair game right now. Fair game. If he doesn't want to call an election, why should he still demand to be in power? He's a civilian, as far as I'm concerned. In any other country, he'd be a civilian, a guy that his term ends at 12 o'clock tonight, and that's it. To me, he's fair game. Thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, I mean, I've seen the reports. I just read the BBC's report on this glowing assessment of Zelensky and how he would have been elected anyway and all of this. I think Russia has the case at a diplomatic level. Hey, maybe his legitimacy is not so strong right now. But at the same time, I do see Scott's point, because I don't know, for me, I don't necessarily see Russia as needing to play a kind of a game of political warfare with Ukraine, or having to convince anybody, Russians, Ukrainians, anybody about this, because I do think that Ukraine is kind of doing this to itself. So I do see the point where it may not be the smartest politically at this moment to make this about Ukraine and its political legitimacy, and it would go against. I mean, Russia has a pretty solid foreign policy around non-interference, so it does make a lot of sense why Russia may not want to get deep into Ukraine's political process. But at the same time, I of course, there's a lot of questions here. I think privately, Russia would be very keen on looking at Ukraine's government and Zelensky's leadership as being illegitimate. But I think that's how Russia's been seeing this from the very beginning anyway, because Ukraine has no interest. Look at the peace initiative. No interest in talking to Russia anyway.
None.
So yeah, I mean,
So-
to me, it seems like a moot point. And this is, I mean, I think it's helpful for Americans, for Westerners, for their consumption to understand what's going on with Ukraine's government.
But the Ukrainians are going to respond by saying that, look, we didn't start this war. Now, we can have a debate about that, how this war started, where this war started, but they're going to say that Russia came into our territory on February 22nd, starting a special military operation that required us to go to extreme measures to declare martial law. Because when you're being invaded by a big nation like Russia, you can't speak of normal political discourse. For instance, how can I run a campaign in Kherson and Zaporizhia? I can't, because Russian troops are there. How can I run a campaign in Crimea? It's occupied by Russians. It's a Ukrainian perspective. Donbass, Lugansk. You can't talk about a presidential campaign for all Ukraine when 20% of the nation is occupied by the Russians. So this is why we declared martial law and we suspended it, because you can't have a presidential election during this period of time. And the parliament is okay with it. We've made that decision. It's nobody's business that we suspended this. We it's not that we've suspended the Constitution permanently, but it's suspended as long as there's martial law, and that martial law will be in place as long as we're being invaded by Russia. That's the Ukrainian counter argument. This is why I say it's best not to get into that discussion. Now, I know why the Russians are doing this, because they want to delegitimize Zelensky. Look, the guy's at 17% popularity right now, and it's going to even decline further. So the Russian goal is to get him out of the office, because that helps facilitate the denazification problem. Once you put in a new political entity, that'll be more conducive of peaceful resolution to the conflict with Russia than Zelensky is. You understand they may be supportive of some of the Russian demands, and changes the pressure dynamics that Russia has to bring to bear on this. That's the Russian goal here. But I have a feeling that Russia's really going to play this card hard. They're going to play this this the illegitimate card very hard. And I don't know if it's going to come out the way that, because again, it's really none of Russia's damn business what constitutional arguments Ukraine wants to make about the legitimacy or illegitimacy of their president.
But Scott, at 17% and time expired, technically he is pretty much out of office if he only has 17%. The other thing
is Russia's business.
Yeah, okay. But then when are the average citizen in Ukraine going to turn on him? There must be a turning point where people have said, okay, my husband, my cousin, my sister, my brother, they're all dying. I'm afraid. The front line, bang, new law comes in, new conscription law comes in. Joey's gone to the front line. Ben's gone to the front line. Susie's gone to the front line. When are his people? This is a nation that loves to hit to the streets and protest and rip the nation apart. They've done it time and time and time and time again. So aren't we ready for, absolute civil war inside the Ukraine? I can see people turning on the government. Thoughts?
But they are turning on the government. But my point is Russia can do this smarter and not play the constitutional card. That's my whole point, is that, for instance, I thought Russia did a brilliant job of putting Zelensky on a wanted list. That delegitimizes him altogether by calling him a criminal. That with all that, you don't have now you don't have to get into a constitutional debate about legitimacy, illegitimate. You just say, we're not negotiating with him because he's a criminal. We're going to arrest him and we're going to hang him by the neck until dead. Now, if you want this war to stop, give us somebody we can talk to. Until then, the war is going to keep on going. It will never end until we conquer your entire pathetic little country. And then the Ukrainians will go, well, we don't want that to happen. So let's get rid of Zelensky and bring in this next guy. And I think that's a more constructive process than trying to get into a constitutional debate with the Ukrainians about the legitimacy or illegitimacy of Zelensky. To call him out as a war criminal, I think, is a legitimate thing for Russia to do. To say we're not going to negotiate with a war criminal, That's another legitimate thing for Russia to do. But I just get a little nervous when I have the Russians start talking about constitutional issues and what defines legitimate nil. That's a problem for the Ukrainian people and only the Ukrainian people.
I mean, you guys have all been following this. I mean, the average person has got to be at the cracking point in Ukraine. They have to be. I mean, that's a country that's operating on, I think, 89% of its power grid has been decimated or at least offline for, a considerable amount of time. Running water coming to a halt in most major cities. I mean, how much more can humans take and trust the man in green on a day-to-day basis where they've just said, fuck, we had enough of this. Let's get out of Dodge. And my feelings are that I think this is coming sooner than later.
Alex, it took 4 years for World War I to trigger revolutions. We're only at the year 2 of this conflict. So we're not quite there yet. But the thing about Zelensky is people have to remember Zelensky came to power through an election where he's a peace candidate. He's a candidate to bring peace with Russia. Guess what happened? I mean, like, who is really calling the shots in Ukraine nowadays, right? I mean, they were ready to negotiate with Russia in March 2022. That would have ended the conflict right there. But then Boris Johnson fly in and say, no, put a stop to that. So, I mean, I think Russia understands that, Zelensky is not really the guy that's making the calls. It's really the Western capitals that has the power to stop the war. But, we don't see any willingness coming from that quarter. Like Scott said, this is about prestige. The NATO prestige is at risk here. They have to make a stand in Ukraine. Otherwise, it will look weak. So, this is very unfortunate. I don't see this conflict wrapping up anytime soon.
So, gentlemen, I'm going to have you on in a week or so. I don't know what your schedule's like, Scott, if you're busy next week. If not, I will see you next week. Do you want me to bring on Carl again, Scott?
Absolutely. Carl. I love Carl.
Okay, boys, we're going to do that. I want to say goodbye to everybody. Danny, head over to Danny Haipong's channel now and get ready. Hit the, notification button. His live stream is going to be starting soon. And I will, let's see. Yeah, I will end it off with how we started. I'll go back to a little bit of Lindsey Graham for everybody on the way out. Okay. And just to fire everybody up for Danny Haipong's live stream. Torture you again. But what the hell? Fantastic talk tonight, guys. I have to say, my chat, I had to slow the chat thing down tonight. So it's really interesting. It's extraordinary how people come up with so many different opinions about this. But the best line of the night was, Carl, you're an arrogant vlogger.
I have always been, man. I lived in US for 30 years. I pick up some of the bad habits, okay? I pick up some Americanism here. So I'm not your soft-spoken Chinese person who is like very humble. I'm not that person. I'm a big talker, because that's how you succeed in the United States. You got to be I appreciate your time, guys. With confidence.
I appreciate your time. And guys, don't forget, if you want everything under one package here, scottritter.com, scottritter.com. Do not forget that. Head over to that website now, and you get all the full details. And I will put a link in the description. Okay, guys, you guys take care. Chat soon. See you next week. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, Scott.
Senator, we want to make sure that we're providing the right kinds of weaponry.
Okay. Would you have supported dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, General Brown, in World War II?
Well, Senator, I think just based on the situation where
Well, we know. I mean, it's happened. We know. I'm not asking. They did it. Do you think that was disproportionate?
It was definitely.
Well, do you, in hindsight, do you think that was the right decision for America to drop 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities in question?
Well, I'll tell you, it stopped the World War.
Okay, well, so we had a. Do you agree, General Austin? If you'd been around, would you say drop them?
I agree with the chairman here.
I mean, if we go back in time, says, hey, we got 2 atomic bombs, should we drop them? What would you say?
Well, I think the leadership was interested in curtailing the.
Well, what's Israel interested in? Do you believe Iran really wants to kill all the Jews if they could? The Iranian regime, yeah. Do you believe Hamas is serious when they say we'll keep doing it over and over again? Do you agree that they will if they can?
I do. Hamas,
okay, right. Do you believe that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization also bent on the destruction of the Jewish state?
Hezbollah is a terrorist organization.
Okay, so Israel's been hit in the last few weeks by Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, dedicated to their destruction. And you're telling me you're going to tell them how to fight the war and what they can and can't use when everybody around them wants to kill all the Jews? And you're telling me that if we withhold weapons in this fight, the existential fight for the life of the Jewish state, it won't send the wrong signal? Do you still think it was a good idea, General Austin, to get out of Afghanistan?
I support the president's decision.
Yeah, I think you do. I think it was a disastrous decision. If we stop weapons necessary to destroy the enemies of the state of Israel at a time of great peril, we will pay a price. This is obscene. It is a.
Here to discuss is former